What if you got invited to a brand new horror theme park? One packed with thrills, laughter, and jaw-dropping attractions. A once-in-a-lifetime chance to be among the very first to experience it. That's exactly what happens when six old friends reunite to visit GremoryLand, a massive park that promises fun, excitement, and heart-stopping scares. At first, it's everything you'd expect: bright lights, creepy rides, and over-the-top effects. But soon, things take a dark turn. The attractions become horrifying and disturbingly real, and the park's cheerful mascots? They're armed and deadly. Now the group must explore each twisted section of the park, uncover hidden clues, and face nightmares tied to their own pasts, all to find a way out. Is GremoryLand just a terrifying prank with incredible special effects, or is something far more sinister? Either way, once you enter GremoryLand, there's no going back. The story begins with Becca, who gets invited to the premiere of GremoryLand, a brand new horror theme park. Excited, she invites her friends to come along. As the group sits in the back of a limousine on their way to the park, something strange happens. The TV inside suddenly turns on by itself. On the screen, a figure appears, Gremory. He welcomes them to GremoryLand and introduces himself, saying their worst nightmares will be born here. He'll be their guide through the unimaginable horrors waiting inside. Then, he adds chillingly, "It's too late to go back. Your only way out is to survive GremoryLand." Everyone gets nervous. Then one of them realizes the car had actually stopped an hour ago and there's still no signal. She's tired of waiting, so she opens the door and steps outside. To her shock, they're already at GremoryLand. The others follow, surprised and confused. Someone asks why Gremory didn't tell them they'd already arrived. Some think it's weird, but others just laugh it off, saying maybe it's part of the experience. Becca takes a photo of the entrance, even though she's bothered. She was invited as an influencer to promote the park, but with no signals, she couldn't stream anything live. As they walk in, they stop by a fountain with a statue of Gremory. Some of them say it gives them the creeps, while others say he actually looks kinda nice. Then they spot an old-looking house labeled Happy Family. Curious, they decide to go inside. Inside, they see mannequins, a smiling family, and a voice welcomes them. "Welcome to the Thompson family home. Please take a seat and enjoy visiting the happiest family in America." They climb into a giant baby stroller ride like one you'd find in a theme park, and it starts moving. At first, the ride seems harmless. They see scenes of the Thompson family living a perfect life. A father named James who works at a prestigious company in Manhattan, and his beautiful wife dedicated to her family. Then, the next room shows the mother pregnant. They're expecting a baby girl, and everything seems happy. One of the friends, Jax, laughs. This is supposed to be scary? But then things start to change. Ahead, Bruno notices 3 different doors, each leading to separate paths, and the group gets split up. In Becca and Jax's car, the scene turns dark. They watch as James loses his job. Humiliated and hopeless, he turns to alcohol. His frustration and shame slowly twist him into something cruel. Soon, he begins to take it out on his wife, brutally beating her. The wife cries, her face bruised, pleading, "You're hurting me, please stop." Until one day, during one of those beatings, she loses the baby. Meanwhile, in another part of the house, the little boy of the family mourns his unborn sister. Grief consumes him. He starts treating a doll as if it were her, and soon the family begins to hear a baby crying behind the walls. The boy believes he somehow brought his dead sister back. He tells his parents, neighbors, and even his friend, Margot. That name hits one of Becca's friends hard, a blonde woman named Margot, who suddenly goes pale. It's her name. She panics, trying to get off the ride. "I don't want to continue this attraction. Let me out." Bruno tries to calm her down. "Margot, relax. It's just a coincidence." But in Becca and Jax's cart, things get even darker. They see a ritual circle drawn on the floor, and in the middle of the baby doll covered in blood. The mother stands over it, smiling wickedly, trying to bring her child back to life. Margot finally breaks free and jumps off the ride. Bruno follows, asking, "Margot, the lights went out. What did you do?" But she doesn't answer. She just says she saw an exit. They rush toward it, open the door, and to their shock, the others are there too. They gather together. Zoe says, "Wait, this looks like the same room we came from," but the entrance door is now boarded shut. Then Rami hears something from upstairs, a voice softly singing, "My dear sweet girl, I felt you growing inside me. I lost you. I thought I was going crazy. But thanks to love, I've brought you back." They reach a bedroom. Inside, a woman, the mother, stands by the bed, still singing. On the bed lies James, the father, his mouth open, his belly huge and swollen like he's pregnant. The mother's song turns darker. She picks up a knife and whispers, "Through your sacrifice, you will be born again." She plunges the knife into James's belly. Blood splatters everywhere, some of it hitting Becca's face. The mother turns to her, smiling, and sings, "And you will be my baby's food." Terrified, the group runs downstairs. Margot screams that the doors are locked until Bruno spots one open. It leads to the basement. With no other choice, they rush down, using their phone lights to see. Below, they find the same ritual circle. As they slowly walk forward, suddenly, the floor bursts into flames, trapping them. Then Zoe looks up and freezes. From the ceiling hangs a giant baby chained in place. Its umbilical cord starts moving like a snake with sharp teeth. It lashes out at them. Zoe barely dodges. The others find a small window, and one by one, they run toward it and open it to find safety. Moments later, after they finally got out of the basement, everyone stopped to catch their breath. Margot was the first to speak. "Becca, what kind of park did you drag us into?" Becca, still shaken, replied, I don't know." Jax tried to lighten the mood. "Come on, guys, it's been fun." Zoe snapped back, angry. "Fun? Becca is covered in blood and we were almost burned alive in there. You think that's fun?" Margot's voice trembled. "I'm done. I'm leaving. I'm not spending another second in this shitty place." Jax tried to calm her down. "It's just dolls and special effects, that's all." But Margot ignored him and kept walking. Then they soon reached the main entrance where they'd arrived earlier, but to their shock, the car was gone. Margot didn't care. "Fine, I'll walk out myself," she said, storming towards the park's edge. But as she walked further, her expression changed. The way out wasn't there. Instead, massive high walls surrounded them on all sides. "Guys," Margot said, panic in her voice, "we were wrong. We're not outside. We never were." Then suddenly, a voice echoed from the entrance of GremoryLand. "There is only one way out of the park by finding the exit. You will have to locate the clues scattered around the attractions. But be careful, it can be dangerous. Welcome to GremoryLand." The group stood frozen. Rami frowned. "What does that even mean? Dangerous attractions? That's gotta be a joke, right?" Becca quickly replied, "Yeah, it has to be. In the end, they'll probably compensate us for all this." But Margot shouted back, holding up her burnt clothes, "Does this look like a joke to you?" Bruno sighed. "We don't have much choice. Those walls are too high. There's no way out." Zoe looked around nervously. "Then we have to go through the park? There's nothing else we can do." So they started walking again, agreeing to find a staff member and demand to leave. After a while, they spotted a small gift shop ahead. Maybe, just maybe, someone was inside. They entered, but the place was completely empty. Margot turned to Becca. "What now?" Becca stammered, I don't know." Margot's frustration boiled over. "You don't know? You should have checked out this park more before dragging us in here." Zoe stepped in, trying to calm her down. "It's not Becca's fault, Margot. We all came here together." Meanwhile, Rami wandered around the shop until something caught his eye. A toy. A creepy doll with Gremory's smiling face, and right next to it, a panda plush. He looked closer and noticed blood on the panda's cheeks. Then, right before his eyes, the panda's mouth stretched into a wide, eerie smile. Rami gasped, stumbling backward as his legs gave out. When he looked again, the panda was gone. Zoe rushed to him. "Rami, what's wrong?" Rami pointed toward the window, his voice shaking. There's someone out there, a panda, someone dressed as a panda." Jax immediately ran outside to see for himself. But outside, they saw not just one, 3 figures in mascot suits. A panda, a rabbit, and a goat. Jax stepped forward angrily. "What the hell is this? Who are you people? How do we leave this park?" The mascots didn't respond. They just stood there silently, staring. Jax shouted louder, "Hey, are you listening? Do I have to make you talk?" Still no answer. Then, all at once, the mascots pulled out weapons. The group screamed and ran as the 3 killers charged after them. Desperate to escape, they rushed into a nearby building and slammed the door shut behind them. Panting heavily, Bruno asked, "What the hell were those things? Are they really trying to kill us? Where are we?" Bruno pulled out a folded paper. "I grabbed this from the gift shop. It's a mop. Looks like we're in something called the Museum of the Sleepers." The group exchanged worried looks but kept moving deeper inside. Then Becca stopped. "Guys, look." Ahead stood a man, perfectly still, watching a static-filled TV. They approached slowly, only to realize it wasn't a man at all, but a lifelike doll. Rami examined it closely. "Why does it look so real?" Suddenly, the static on the TV flickered. Gremory's face appeared. "Hello, friends. Welcome to the Museum of the Sleepers. This is a place of contemplation. It is very important not to disturb those who rest here.
Jeff ensures that the rules are followed and keeps absolute silence during your visit. I hope you enjoy your stay. The screen flickered again, briefly showing 16 sleepers before going black. Jax left nervously. Oh, great, Jeff. Yeah, we're tight. We even swapped hots once. Becca said firmly, Jax, stop. Just come on. They walked deeper into the museum. Along the walls, creepy smiling dolls were framed with a sign that read, "Do not disturb." Jax smirked and shouted, "Wake up!" Suddenly, the doll's eyes opened, still smiling. Becca turned sharply. Jax, what are you doing? Gremory said to be quiet. Jax shrugged. Relax, she doesn't seem to mind. Then came a sound, a rumbling track behind them. Jax turned, and there he was, Jeff. Moving straight toward them, he slammed into Jax, knocking him to the floor. Jeff raised a finger to his lips and whispered, "Shh." The group backed away slowly, terrified, and kept walking deeper into the museum. Ahead, rows of tables blocked their path, each with delicate flower vases. They stepped through carefully, trying not to make a sound. Then they spotted another doll, this one holding a violin. Bruno moved cautiously, but one of the chains on his pants caught the table, pulling it down. The vase fell and shattered loudly. The violin doll started playing, and then that rumbling again. Jeff was coming. This time, he was holding a baseball bat. He swung, barely missing Margot's head, yelled in anger, and charged towards him, but Jeff's next swing hit him square in the face. And once again, Jeff whispered, "Shh." After that brutal hit, they started walking again, shaken, but trying to keep it together. As they moved forward, they saw a wooden sign that read, "Old Mill Town." Following it, they arrived at what looked like a creepy Halloween-themed village. The air felt colder here, heavier. Margot whispered, warning everyone to stay quiet and watch where they step. They couldn't make any noise or Jeff would come after them again. As Margot carefully moved forward, a huge spider dropped beside her. Startled, she screamed for just a moment. But that one sound was enough. Lights in a nearby miniature house flickered on. Crows in the trees started shrieking, their cries echoing through the village. Then, that dreaded sound again, the rumbling of Jeff's track. This time, Jeff appeared holding a taser. He pointed it forward wildly, sparks flying as he tried to hit them. Everyone ducked and dodged out of the way, stumbling off the track. And once again, Jeff raised his finger and whispered, "Shh." That was the last straw for Jax. Furious, he yelled it was time to get rid of that freaky doll once and for all. Becca tried to stop him, but Jax wouldn't listen. He rushed forward, kicked Jack from behind, and Jeff almost lost balance, teetering forward. But then, Jeff's eyes shifted, glowing a deadly red. The taser in his hand morphed into a gun. He slowly turned towards Jax, his crimson eyes locked on him, gun pointed straight at him. Jax froze, completely shocked. Becca panicked, yelling his name, her voice trembling, echoing through the village. That sound made Jeff turn towards her instead, and, without hesitation, he fired. Becca barely dodged the bullet, her breath shaking as she looked up at him. Jeff stared right back, and once again he raised his finger and whispered, "Shh." Moments later, as they walked down the narrow corridor, everyone was shaken. They couldn't believe what just happened. Was that really a gunshot? The hallway stretched endlessly ahead of them, dim and silent. Zoe whispered, "This corridor's too long and narrow. If we make any noise, we're screwed." As they kept moving, they reached a door at the end, but it was locked. Zoe lifted her flashlight, shining it through the other room. "I see something. It looks like a ballroom on the other side." Inside that ballroom, there was an exit sign in the distance, but there was no way to open the door from here. Then Zoe pointed at something ahead, a mannequin with its mouth covered, eyes closed, and holding a key in its hand. She squinted and said, "I think that thing has what we need." But the key was just out of reach, separated by the metal door. Zoe thought for a moment, then said, "Looks like we'll have to wake it up." Margot's eyes widened. "Are you crazy? If we make a sound, Jeff will come and shoot us." Zoe, determined, replied, "Not if the dummy opens the door first." She took a deep breath, and before anyone could stop her, she shouted, "Wake up!" The mannequin's eyes snapped open, and suddenly more mannequins inside the ballroom began dancing eerily. Their stiff movements echoed through the hall, and then, that dreaded sound again, the rumbling of Jeff's track. Becca's voice trembled. He's coming! Jeff is coming! Zoe leaned against the door, panicking. "Come on, hurry!" The mannequin slowly reached the door using the key. Jeff's track got louder, closer, almost there. Finally, the door creaked open enough for Zoe to slip through. They all rushed into the ballroom, sprinting toward the exit at the end. But chaos struck. Becca tripped and crashed into one of the dancing mannequins, falling hard. She scrambled to her feet and ran for the exit, while Zoe looked back and yelled, "Come on, Becca, the door is closing!" Becca was almost there, just a few more steps, when a gunshot exploded through the air. Bang. Zoe froze. Blood splattered across the floor as Becca's body collapsed. Jeff stood behind her, his eyes going red, the gun still smoking in his hand. The exit door slammed shut. Zoe screamed, banging on the door, shouting Becca's name over and over, but it was too late.
Moments later, silence filled them. Zoe sank into a corner, trembling, her tears falling quietly as grief washed over her. Rami walked over, worried for her. And then a memory hit her. A flashback, back in high school. Zoe sat alone, just like now. She remembered her father's voice shouting, her mother crying, begging for it to stop. Those memories never left her. They haunted her every time someone raised their voice or tried to get close. Rami had noticed her then, too. He walked over, calling her name gently as he touched her shoulder. But Zoe was already crying, her voice breaking as she yelled, "Don't touch me! You all think you have the right to touch us? To do whatever you want? You all violent by nature." She ran out, leaving Rami frozen in confusion and guilt. Later that day, when classes ended, Rami stopped by her desk. "Zoe, are you coming?" he asked softly. But she ignored him, turning to Becca instead. "I'll go to the teacher's room with you. We can walk home together," she said. Rami lowered his gaze and left quietly, leaving Zoe behind. A little later, Zoe and Becca were walking when they heard laughter nearby. Someone was being bullied. When they looked closer, they saw it was Rami, shaking, surrounded by 3 bullies. One of them sneered, "Ha ha ha, look at him, what a baby." Without thinking, Zoe stormed forward, her voice fierce. "Hey, what the hell are you doing? 3 against 1, you cowards." One of the bullies smirked. "We caught him staring on our asses. We don't want him touching himself, thinking about us." Zoe shot back, furious. "You're the ones who spend hours harassing the girls in class, staring at their chests. You're the disgusting ones." Becca turned to Jax, who was standing nearby with the bullies. "Jax, what are you doing with them? Rami's our friend." Jax just shrugged. "I'm not doing anything." The tension faded, ending the commotion. Later, as everyone was heading home, Zoe walked beside Rami. She took a deep breath and said softly, "I'm sorry for earlier. I wasn't feeling well. I shouldn't have reacted like that." Rami looked down. "You don't have to explain if you don't want to." But Zoe did. She said things had been awful at home, that her father hurt her mother, and she'd taken it out on him even though he didn't deserve it. Then Zoe said to Rami, "I know it wasn't fair, and I'm sorry. You're not like the others, Rami. You're different." Back in the present, they all felt devastated by Becca's death. But Jax kept repeating that it wasn't their fault, that there was nothing they could do to help her, and that they had to move on or they'd never leave the park. Through tears, Zoe snapped, her voice trembling. "Do you want to shut up? Can you give us a few minutes to take everything in?" But Jax shot back, saying they were wasting time doing nothing. Zoe stood up, glaring at him. "Wasn't it you," she shouted, "who said from the beginning that we should stay in the park? That all of this was super fun?" Jax replied, telling her to calm down, that what happened wasn't his fault. But Zoe's anger burned hotter. "Then why does it seem like what happened to Becca doesn't even matter to you?" While Rami sat with his hands pressed against his ears, he couldn't take it anymore. The shouting, the guilt, the pain. He was trembling, holding himself back. And he screams at Jax, "Shut up! You're an insensitive jerk who never cared about anyone's feelings. You didn't deserve Becca's friendship. I wish it was you instead of her." But the words never came out. It was just his inner thought. He stayed silent until suddenly he heard something. A calm, angelic voice. He looked up and saw an angel above him. She told him he needed to listen, that he couldn't let those dark emotions control him because they would only make him irrational and unfair. She said he had to follow the path of peace, that only through calm and respect could he move forward in life. Hearing that, Rami stood up and stepped between Zoe and Jax, trying to stop their fight. "We can't do this," he said firmly. "We can't turn on each other. If we want to get out of this park, we need to stay united." They all took a deep breath and began walking again. Soon they found themselves standing in front of a cinema building. They decided to go inside. While the others looked around, Bruno went to a nearby vending machine to grab a drink. But as he took a sip, he froze. In the distance, he saw them, the same tree mascots from before. They were walking straight towards them. Bruno pointed and panicked. "The mascots! They're coming this way!" Without hesitation, they started running again as the mascots chased after them. They sprinted until they came across a strange gate. They pushed through it, but when they entered, Bruno stopped. They were standing in a graveyard with an old church in the middle.
Before they could react, the gate behind them slammed shut, trapping them inside. With no other choice, they moved towards the church. But when they reached the door, it wouldn't budge. It was locked. Some suggested finding another way in, but as they wandered, the place began to twist and turn like a maze. "This place is endless," someone whispered. As they searched, Bruno suddenly heard something, a faint voice calling his name. "Bruno!" He turned around and froze. There was a shadowy figure in the distance. His heart dropped. "Mia?" he whispered. The silhouette turned and ran deeper into the maze. Without thinking, Bruno chased after it. "Mia, is that you?" Then, flashback. A photo of Bruno and his little sister, Mia. Bruno was lying on his bed, texting with Margot. His mom opened the door, worry in her eyes. "Bruno, have you spoken to your sister? She finished her piano lesson 2 hours ago and hasn't come home." Bruno didn't even look up from his phone. "She probably met up with some friends or something." His mom replied, "I've called her several times. She's not answering." Bruno sighed. "I already told you, Mom, I don't know anything. She's fine." But she wasn't fine. At that very moment, Mia lay motionless on the dirt by some deserted mountain tracks, probably already gone. Back in the present, Bruno was still running through the maze, chasing the shadow of his sister, until he stopped dead in front of something that made his blood run cold. It was a mausoleum with his name engraved on it. Meanwhile, Margot and the others realized Bruno was missing. They started calling out for him, their voices echoing through the graveyard. As they searched, they too stumbled upon a mausoleum with Bruno's name carved across it. Zoe pointed to another one nearby. "Wait, I see one too. It has my name." She stepped closer, confused. What does this mean? Curious, she stepped inside. The room was silent and empty. "There's nothing here," she murmured. But suddenly, the floor gave away beneath her feet. Zoe screamed as she fell into darkness. Rami turned towards her, voice eyes wide, but she was gone. Then, another flashback. Mia giggled and said to Bruno, "Close your eyes, brother, and count to 10. Bruno softly closed his eyes and began counting. Mia ran off, laughing as she tried to hide. When he opened his eyes, she was gone. Minutes passed. Bruno began to worry. He searched everywhere, calling her name until he finally saw something that shattered him. He froze. It was Mia, lying on the ground, her eyes staring blankly upward. Her lungs were outside her body, spilling from her mouth. Bruno's hand shook as he grabbed his inhaler, breathing hard, trying not to collapse. It was her. It was really her. Back in the present, Bruno gasped awake, clutching his head in pain. He wandered through the underground corridors, his heart pounding. Then he heard it again. Mia's voice. "Brother, I'm here." Bruno's eyes widened. "Mia, I don't understand. I thought you were dead." Her voice echoed softly. "I've been here all this time, waiting for you." Bruno followed it, desperate. "Why are you hiding from me? I missed you so much. Please just let me see you." And then her voice replied one last time, sweet but chilling. "Sure, brother. From now on, we'll be together. Forever." What Bruno saw next froze his blood. From the darkness emerged a corpse, a walking skeleton with only lungs still intact, swaying as it approached him. Bruno's face twisted in terror. He turned and ran, sprinting through the tunnels until he hit a dead end. He turned back. The shadow was closing in. Panicked, he bolted in another direction, stumbling into a vast chamber lined with countless corridors. His breath quickened as he looked around, and then he saw them. Not one, but two of those horrifying, lung-walking skeletons.
Meanwhile, from above, Jax asked Rami what he meant about Zoe disappearing. Rami explained, breathing heavily, "She was right here. I heard her scream, and when I turned around, she was gone. Maybe there's a door or something." Then Rami's eyes widened, an idea. Without saying another word, he started walking. "Hey, where are you going?" Jax called out. Rami stopped in front of a mausoleum, his own name engraved on the stone. He hesitated, then stepped inside. "We all have one of these," he said softly. "Maybe it only works if..." But before he could finish, the floor suddenly gave way. Rami screamed as he fell into darkness, slamming hard against the ground. "Ah, my leg!" he groaned, forcing himself up, limping through a cold, narrow corridor lined with skulls. His heart pounded. Then, footsteps. Rami froze. A shadow moved toward him. He braced himself. But it was just Jax. They both screamed, startled, then burst into nervous laughter. "Holy crap," Jax gasped. "I thought you were some kind of monster." "Same here," Rami laughed weakly. "You scared me to death." They caught their breath. "Do you know where the others are?" Rami asked.
Jack shook his head. No, I went through my own mausoleum. The floor opened up just like yours. They walked deeper into the tunnel and then they stopped cold. Before them was a nightmare. The narrow path was lined with corpses, bodies slumped against the walls, skulls displayed like trophies. Jack smirked. What's wrong, Rami? Don't want to go in? Rami shuddered. I really don't want to walk through that. Jax chuckled. Still a little girl, huh? Rami glared. It's not just women who get scared. After what happened to Becca, I think it's normal to be afraid. Jax's smirk faded. Then quietly he reached out and held Rami's hand. All right, let's go together. They walked hand in hand through the tunnel, their footsteps echoing, skulls staring from every corner. Finally, they reached the end. Rami sighed. Guess nothing happened after all. But then Bruno's scream ripped through the tunnels. Jack's eyes widened. That's Bruno. It's coming from that direction. They sprinted toward the sound. Bruno was trapped in a vast chamber, surrounded by endless corridors, panicking, yelling, "Get away from me," as two skeletal figures chased him. But those skeletons were Rami and Jax. Behind Bruno, Zoe appeared, trying to calm him, but in Bruno's terrifying eyes, they weren't his friends. They were monsters. Flashback. A time when Bruno and Margot were inseparable. She'd often visit his home. One day, Bruno's mother opened the door, pale and exhausted. Margot smiled. "Hi, Mrs. Miller. I'm here to see Bruno." "She's upstairs," she whispered. Margot went up quietly, but when she opened the door, she froze. On Bruno's bed lay an animal skull. He was whispering to a Ouija board. "Where are you? Answer me if you're listening, Mia. Speak to me." Back in the present, Margot found Bruno, trembling. "Bruno, are you okay? What you saw, it's not real. We think it's from the drink you took earlier." Bruno shook his head. "No, I heard her voice. It was Mia. She called me." "Bruno, those are hallucinations," Margot pleaded. "There's no one else here. Whatever you drink, it's messing with your mind." But Bruno's voice broke. "No, there's something else in this park. Don't you see? Every attraction we've entered, it's connected to us. And those mausoleums, why do they have our names on them?" Zoe spotted something on the ground, a dusty notebook. She read it out loud. "Tombstones have been desecrated several times and the bodies disappeared without a trace. I have decided to investigate what lies within these catacombs, marking my path so I don't get lost. Legends say a creature lives beneath these lands. It once fed on animals, but since humans settled here, it found a new source of food. The priest hears strange noises under the church every night, at exactly 12. As she finished reading, the church bells began to ring, loud, echoing through the tunnels. The ground shook, a cold wind blew through, then a roar that shattered the silence. From the darkness, a monstrous worm burst out, massive, glistening fangs dripping with slime. Zoe screamed, "Run!" They bolted through the tunnels, hearts pounding, the creature tearing through stone behind them. Then suddenly it stopped, turning down another path. They froze, gasping for air. "It's not following us," Rami said, barely breathing. "You're right, but that thing could jump out from anywhere." They moved cautiously, silent. Then Margot froze, eyes wide. "It's coming again," she screamed. The worm thundered through the passage, shaking the walls. "Run!" They sprinted, dodging debris, the ground trembling beneath their feet. But then they hit a dead end. "We need to go back," Margot shouted. They turned just as the monster lunged from behind. It nearly swallowed them whole, but they dove into a narrow tunnel just in time. They didn't stop running until Zoe yelled, "Look, there's an arrow!" A hand-drawn mark on the wall, just like the notebook said. "That's the way out." They followed it, sprinting with everything they had. Jax looked back. "Rami, don't stay behind!" But Rami was limping, his ankle still hurt. Jax slowed down, throwing Rami's arm over his shoulder. "Come on, man, we're getting out together." Finally, they reached the exit. But their hope died instantly. The passage was blocked, tons of rocks piled high. Behind them, the roar returned. "Move the rocks, hurry!" Bruno shouted. They clawed at the stones, hearts racing. The roar grew louder, closer. Then finally the gap opened. They stumbled out, gasping, running into the night. Ahead stood a dead-life tree in the dark. Moments later, the rain began to fall, soft at first, then pouring in heavy sheets. The sound drowned their footsteps as they walked. Jax tried to keep their spirits up, saying once daylight came, it would be easier to find the park's exit. Through the rain, they spotted an old restaurant up ahead with a readable sign, "Bloodjur." They hurried toward it, shivering, desperate for shelter. Jax noticed a restroom and told the others to go inside first. He wanted to check if there was something that could help Rami's ankle. Inside the restroom, Jax found a first aid kit. Rami softly remarked how coincidental it was that they found one here. Then softly he thanked Jax for helping him, saying he was glad things were better between them and that they could talk to each other like before. Jax admits that sometimes he can be a bit of an asshole. He knelt down as Rami sat, tending carefully to Rami's ankle. A flashback came, a memory from their childhood. Jax and Rami had made a goofy promise to each other. They would be best friends forever. Suddenly, Jax kissed Rami on the cheek, which made Rami's eyes go wide open in surprise. The moment was interrupted as Jax's father appeared to pick him up. Jax, listen to me, his father said firmly. I don't like you kissing other boys. Why? Jax asked. Because it's weird. It's not right. Kids don't do things like that. The next day, though, Jax and Rami were playing together again. Other kids asked why they were always together and why they didn't play with anyone else. One of them whispered, Jax and Rami are homo, that they're weird. Jax stayed calm. We're not weird, he said. Another kid suggested, stop playing with dolls like girls. Come play football with us. So Jax followed them, leaving Rami behind. As he grew older, people around him told him what it meant to be masculine. A real man had to be strong, big, and tough. Fast forward to later, Jax was kissing a girl in a room, and as they got intimate, she touched him in his private part, which startled him. Jax immediately stopped her. Wait a moment, he said, feeling conflicted. The girl, annoyed, shot back, you wanted this. Maybe you just discovered you're gay or something. Jax replied sharply, maybe you're just too eager to take it. I'm not a whore, she said. I just like it with you. Everyone in class says you're a real man, but now you don't want to be touched? Is it because it's small? At that moment, Jax grabbed her by the neck. Shut up. You're nothing but a slut, he spat. Back in the present, Jax and Rami looked at each other, the tension melted, and they began kissing intimately in the bathroom.
Meanwhile, inside the restaurant, they began discussing the park, that Gremory told them the only way to leave was by finding the clues to the exit. And after all that happened, they knew Gremory wouldn't let them escape so easily. Then Zoe suggested that it wasn't safe to wander the streets with the mascots trying to kill them. As Bruno looked at the book, he saw something. Bruno showed the drawing in the book, saying he'd seen the same drawing on the cinema ticket machine. Zoe agreed, saying maybe those symbols were related to the attractions. Then Bruno said he remembered one with the shape of a fetus, that it could correspond to the first attraction they entered. Then Margot said she also saw another symbol, that the museum guard Jeff wore a pin with the symbol of a moon. Then Bruno suggested that they should try going to the cinema, that maybe it would finally lead them to the exit. Minutes later, at the cinema, they went straight to the ticket machine, pressing the symbol. Upon pressing it, a door opened from the hallway. From outside, Margot said that she refused to enter, that if they continued like that, they'd end up dead. Then Rami replied, so are you going to stay alone out here? The mascots could find you. Then Margot said that they hadn't seen them in a while, that they should take the opportunity to find another way to escape. Then Bruno said calmly, please, Margot, come in with us. We have to stay together. Do it for me. Margot stayed silent, and without a choice, she came in. They went inside the cinema. As they walked deeper, suddenly a blinding light appeared. It was the cinema projector. Then a video of Gremory appeared, saying, welcome to the GremoryLand cinema. Today is a very special day, because I am pleased to present the first horror movie starring our dear friends. And it showed the 3 mascots from hell, the same ones from before. Upon seeing that, Margot was shocked, while Zoe commented that the screen wasn't normal, saying she thought they had to get into the movie. Margot started walking away from the cinema as Bruno called her name to stop her. But when Margot arrived at the door, it was closed, locked, couldn't be opened. Then Zoe spoke. Margot, listen to us. There's no other choice. We have to move on in order to find the exit. Margot sat down and said, then go by yourself. When you find it, come back to tell me. Then Bruno said they couldn't force Margot if she didn't want to go, saying he'd stay with her so she wouldn't be alone. But Zoe said it was a bad idea to split up. Then Margot replied, sure, because keeping together has been a great idea, right? I'm not stupid. I'm not going to end up like Becca. And with that, Zoe, Jax, and Rami started going inside the movie, disappearing behind the curtain. Inside, they were surrounded by dead trees, the crimson-red background around them. As they walked cautiously, Rami called out Jax's name, asking about what happened before. But Jax answered sharply, shut up. It shouldn't have happened, but you didn't stop until you got what you wanted. It's disgusting. And with that, Jax continued walking, while Rami looked at his back, annoyed. Then suddenly, Rami heard the angelic voice again, the same one from before. She said, Rami, listen to me. Although his words hurt you, it's his problem for not being able to be honest with himself. Anger will not lead to anything constructive.
Understanding and love is what you must believe in. Eventually, they arrived at an old barn, but Zoe said they needed a key to open the lock. Then she turned around and said she thought they'd have to find it inside that house. Behind them was an old-looking house. Minutes later, they entered. They started looking around when Zoe saw the goat mascot sitting, watching a static TV. But outside, where Margot and Bruno sat, they started chatting about the old days, how they had changed over the past few years, how they all reunited together, and how once they met again, they realized they were no longer the same people they once were. Then Margot slowly reached her hand toward the armchair, saying that now she couldn't stand Zoe. But then Margot said to Bruno, "However, you and I have always had a special bond, right?" Bruno smiled and replied, "Yes, you were always a good family friend." Upon hearing that, Margot looked disappointed because she was obviously hitting on Bruno. And with that, Margot removed her hand from the armchair beside him. Meanwhile, Zoe walked cautiously, whispering quietly, "Shh." As they continued, they arrived at the kitchen. The room was filthy, walls smeared with grime, floors sticky with old blood. The smell hit them instantly. Rami covered his nose in disgust. A pot on the stove was filled with what looked and smelled like rotting meat. Jax scanned the cabinets above. He slowly opened one, but then suddenly a plate slipped and shattered loudly on the floor. The sound echoed. The goat mascot heard it. He stood up, clutching his enormous scissors. Rami panicked as the heavy footsteps drew near. The three of them bolted, desperately searching for a place to hide. Zoe darted into a storage room. As she scanned her surroundings, she noticed something glinting above, a key hanging on the wall. Attached to it was a tag that read, "Farm Door." Back in the kitchen, the goat mascot stepped inside, his presence cold and menacing. Jax and Rami hid behind, Rami covering his mouth to silence his breathing. As the shadow moved closer, Jax motioned for them to sneak away. They tiptoed quietly toward the kitchen door. But then, the goat mascot's gaze locked onto the storage room. Inside, Zoe froze as she saw the dark silhouette of his body through the door. She gasped quietly. Just as the goat mascot reached for the handle, Jax shouted, "Hey, over here!" The goat mascot turned sharply. Seeing them, he drew his massive scissors and lunged forward. Jax and Rami ran for their lives. They reached the main door. Rami grabbed the handle, but it wouldn't budge. He said it stuck. The goat mascot swung his scissors, the blades slicing through the air. Jax and Rami narrowly dodged and sprinted upstairs, hearts pounding. The mascot chased after them, raising his weapon to strike Rami, but before he could, Zoe appeared from behind and grabbing the mascot's body, yelling, "Run!" The goat mascot roared, thrashing violently. He swung his arm, sending Zoe crashing down the stairs. Jax and Rami kept running. They turned a corner and spotted a door at the end of the hall. Without hesitation, they burst inside, and what they saw froze them in horror. A human body, soaked in blood, hung upside down from the ceiling. Before they could react, the goat mascot caught up. He lunged straight for Jax. Jax shouted, "Rami, help me," as he struggled to hold back its arm. But Rami stood frozen in the corner, trembling with fear, unable to move. Jax shouted, "Do something." He glanced around desperately and spotted a metal tool on a nearby table, something he could use as a weapon. But it was just out of reach. Then his eyes caught the glint of another pair of scissors from the mascot's pocket. Summoning all his strength, Jax snatched the scissors and stabbed the goat mascot in the neck. Blood spurted. The mascot staggered and collapsed to the ground. Jax took off the mascot's head, and underneath was the face of a man, lifeless, his eyes hollow, as blood streamed down his neck. Jax turned to Rami, anger flaring in his eyes. "Why didn't you help me? You were scared to death, weren't you? You're still that same school sissy." Rami's expression hardened. He said, "Don't call me that." Jax sneered. "Since you're a coward, I can call you whatever I want." Then suddenly, Rami heard that same angelic voice echoing in his mind. "Rami, listen to me. What he says isn't true. Remember, being offended is a choice we make." Jax barked. "What are you looking at? Do you hear me, dwarf?" Rami clenched his fists, his voice steady. "Unlike you, I'm not ashamed of my size." Jax froze, surprised by his defiance. Then something strange happened. A speech bubble appeared as if coming from Jax's own body, from below his waist. It taunted him. "Don't let him talk to you like that. Show him who the man is here." Fury surged through Jax. He grabbed Rami by the neck, yelling, "You're the kind of person I hate the most, the whiners of political correctness. You know what? Since childhood, you've disgusted me. That's why I walked away from you. I don't even understand how I could ever be friends with someone like you.
Another flashback. In the past, Rami loved watching anime shows. But one day, Rami's mom switched the channel to something else. She told him that watching those shows wasn't good for him, and instead he could watch The Angel of Peace as much as he wanted because it highlighted the values that society desperately needed. Later at school, Rami was bullied again. The bullies started calling him Sissy. Hey Sissy, can't you hear me? What's wrong? You only talk to girls? Is it because you're also a girl, Rami? What an ugly girl. Ha ha ha. Rami held himself back, clenching his fist tightly, gripping a ball pen in his hand. Then the bully turned to Jax and said, "What do you think, Jax? Would you like to have an ugly girlfriend like this?" Upon hearing those words, Rami couldn't take it anymore. He snapped and stabbed the bully's hand with the ball pen, making the bully scream loudly. Later, at Rami's house, his parents told him they were disappointed. But they also admitted that it was their fault as parents, that they hadn't been able to teach him that violence was never the answer. For that reason, they decided that Rami should start visiting someone who could help him, a psychotherapist. When Rami met the therapist, he opened up about how he was constantly bullied and how the bullying only stopped for a few days after he hurt one of them. Rami said he knew what he did was wrong, but when the bullies saw his regret, they started tormenting him again. The psychotherapist listened and said, "Emotions are energy, Rami. They need to be released. If you don't find a way to release your anger, it'll explode again, just like the day you hurt that boy." Then the therapist suggested something different. Since Rami loved writing, she told him to pour all his feelings and thoughts into stories, to vent his emotions through words instead of harm. Later, at home, Rami began typing on his computer, releasing his anger and frustration through the stories he wrote. Over time, his writing improved, and eventually, Rami won a writing contest, earning the title of Best Short Storyteller. Back in the present, Rami pleaded with Jax to stop, saying he couldn't breathe. Jax finally let go and walked away, calling Rami pathetic. As Rami clutched his neck, gasping for air, he remembered his days of being bullied. The memories flooded back, and anger filled his eyes. He grabbed a metallic tool and rushed toward Jax, striking him on the head. Blood started dripping down from Jax's scalp. Furious, Jax glared at Rami. "You're a shitty coward. You don't even have the guts to fight with your own hands." But Rami replied coldly, "It's not cowardice, it's evolution." He raised the tool again and continued to strike Jax, again and again, until Jax lay motionless on the ground, bleeding heavily as blood splattered everywhere. Rami finally dropped the metallic tool and took a deep breath. Just then, Zoe appeared, and she saw everything. Zoe froze. She had deep trauma when it came to violence. Rami was shocked to see her there, while Zoe stared at him with wide, trembling eyes. What have you done?" she whispered. Rami tried to explain, desperate. "I couldn't stand it anymore. I was tired of being insulted and abused, tired of being treated like I was worthless." But Zoe wasn't listening. Her gaze shifted to Jax's body on the floor, blood pooling beneath his head. Rami kept talking, explaining himself frantically, but Zoe shouted, "So that's your solution? You think killing him will fix things? Rami, you've lost your mind. You're not different from them. You're worse than them." With that, Zoe slammed the door shut and locked Rami inside. From behind the door, Rami shouted, "Zoe, what are you doing? Listen to me. Open the door." But Zoe didn't respond. She just walked away. Moments later, Zoe reached the movie exit. She stopped, haunted by the image of Rami's furious face as he beat Jax, and by the sight of Jax's bloody body on the ground. She closed her eyes, trembling, then opened them again, convincing herself that maybe she had made the right decision. She took a deep breath and stepped out of the movie. Outside, Margot asked, "Did you find anything? Where are Jax and Rami?" Zoe hesitated, then lied. "We found a farm, but suddenly a hole opened in the ground and they fell into an underground corridor, just like the one in the cemetery. I tried to help them, but it closed again. I found this key in the farm. Maybe it opens the barn door. We might find them there." Then Zoe used the key to unlock the padlock. When the door opened, they stepped inside a neon-colored room so bright it hurt their eyes. The floor was painted with swirling colors, a spiral pattern that made them dizzy just by looking at it. As they walked, they saw an exit door ahead. Zoe tried to open it, but the key didn't fit. Then Margot pointed upward. "Look, on the ceiling!" There was another key hanging high above them, far out of reach. Suddenly, a cheerful voice echoed through the room. "Hello, folks! I'm the Rabbit of Fun, and this is my playroom. Looking for your key? No problem. I'll bring it closer. But first, let's go for a spin." The spiral floor began to spin rapidly, making it almost impossible for them to stand. The rabbit lowered the key slightly toward them, teasing. Zoe tried to grab it, but then the floor suddenly stopped spinning, causing her to stumble and fall. The rabbit chuckled. "Oh, I see it's hard to reach it that way. Don't worry, I don't want to make you dizzier. The key is all yours." Bruno approached, reaching for the key, but the rabbit suddenly shouted, "Just kidding!" The floor started spinning again, this time even faster. They all struggled to stay upright, feeling their heads spin uncontrollably. "Stop it!" Margot screamed. She grabbed a picture frame hanging on the wall and hurled it toward the key. By luck, it hit, knocking the key loose as it bounced toward Zoe. Without hesitation, Zoe grabbed the key and staggered toward the exit door. Dizzy and disoriented, she fumbled to fit the key into the lock, but finally she managed to turn it. The door swung open and the spinning floor came to a complete stop. Finally, Zoe, Margot, and Bruno entered the room. As they walked in, Zoe noticed something on the floor. Numbers from 1 to 3 were painted there. Zoe turned around after hearing a noise behind her. It was the sound of the door closing by itself. Suddenly, shining metallic bars appeared, separating them from the other room where the panda stood on a podium. Then the panda spoke. "It's time to test your friendship. It's time for the truth game. In this game, you'll reveal if you are truly as good of friends as you think you are, if you really know each other. You must answer a series of questions. Step on the number that matches the answer you believe is correct. Don't hesitate too much. Answer as quickly as possible." As Bruno looked up, he noticed something above them. The panda continued, "If you fail to answer, the ceiling will crush you. However, a wrong answer will cause the ceiling to drop significantly. Use your time wisely. Without further delay, let us begin." The panda's first question appeared. "Who is the youngest in the group?" The screen behind the panda displayed the choices: Rami, Jax, and Becca. The ceiling began to click as it slowly descended. They started discussing frantically. "It's Rami," Margot said. "His birthday is in December." "No," Zoe replied. "Becca's birthday is in December. Rami's is July 10th. But Bruno interrupted, saying that Jax's birth month was in November. Margot turned to him. "Are you sure?" Bruno replies, "Yeah, his birthday's on Halloween, November." Without further hesitation, they chose Becca as their answer. A cheerful, "Correct answer," appeared on the screen. The ceiling stopped moving. The panda grinned. "Very good. Next question. What is Margot's favorite color?" Without hesitation, Margot answered, "Pink." The screen flashed "correct" again. Margot scoffed, "What a stupid question. How could I not know that?" But the panda smirked and continued, "All right then, what is Chandler's job?" The choices appeared on the screen again. Zoe confused. "Who's Chandler?" she whispered. The ceiling began to move again as they panicked. Bruno tried to think, "Chandler, maybe one of the people who attended the graduation party?" Margot replies, "I don't remember anyone with that name." Bruno shouted toward the panda, "We don't know who Chandler is. This has to be a trick question." But Margot's voice trembled. "The ceiling's getting closer. We need to answer something." With no choice, they guessed an answer. But sadly, they were wrong. The ceiling dropped drastically, stopping just before crushing them. The panda's voice echoed coldly. "Be careful. You must answer faster this time, because your last mistake will be your last." The next question appeared. Who locked their best friend in a farmhouse room? All 3 options showed the same name, Zoe. Margot turned to her, alarmed. "Zoe, what does this mean?" Zoe said, "It's complicated. I'll explain when we get out of here." Zoe stepped forward and answered. Of course, her answer was correct. But Margot glared at her. "You lied to us. What really happened to Jax and Rami?" Before Zoe could reply, the panda smiled cruelly. "Final question," it said. "Where were you on July 27th, 2010 at 5:30 p.m.? Bruno froze. His face went pale. That was the exact date and time his sister had died. The screen showed the 3 choices again. Bruno looked at Margot. "What kind of sick joke is this?" he demanded. Zoe stammered. I don't remember where I was that day, but obviously none of us were with your sister when she died." Bruno blamed himself. "If only he'd listened to my mom and picked up Mia after her piano class, I could have been there when she had her asthma attack. But instead, I sat around texting Margot, who was supposed to be in the library that afternoon." They selected the 3rd choice. But once again, the screen flashed incorrect. The ceiling began to fall fast, sharp, pointed edges descending toward them. They dropped to the floor, barely avoiding the deadly spikes. The panda chuckled. "Since it's the final question, I'll give you one last chance to answer." Zoe said, "It doesn't make sense. We picked the right one." Bruno replied, "Maybe we shouldn't pick anything. But what if doing nothing kills us?" Zoe argued. Bruno stared up at the falling spikes. If the right answer isn't right, maybe it's a trick question. The ceiling came closer and closer, just inches from their heads. Then at the last moment, Margot answered. A loud ding echoed through the room. Correct answer. Bruno looked at her, shocked. Margot, how did you... But before he could finish, Margot whispered, her eyes heavy with guilt. I wasn't in the library. I was with Mia.
Then Margot explained to Bruno what had really happened in the past. That afternoon, Mia had a piano lesson, and Margot decided to go pick her up. Margot wanted to talk to Mia in private about an issue between them, so she lied to Bruno and told him that she was in the library. Margot and Mia went for a walk in the mountains next to the academy. Margot told Mia that she had noticed a change in her attitude toward her, that Mia was barely speaking to her, and she wanted to know if Mia was mad at her. But Mia said she couldn't stand her anymore. She said she was tired of seeing Margot at their house, tired of her being at family events, and that Margot was keeping her away from her brother, Bruno. Margot told Mia that they were both like family to her, but Mia yelled back that she would never be her family. Mia demanded that Margot stay away from Bruno, and even called her a parasite. The words hurt Margot deeply, but she didn't want to cry in front of Mia, so she ran away. The next day, Margot heard the terrible news, and she felt responsible for Mia's death. She had wanted to tell Bruno about that day, but she was never able to. Then the panda spoke, announcing that they had won the game and that their reward, the final clue, was now displayed on the screen. Another door opened, the exit of the game. Bruno, Margot, and Zoe stepped out of the room as Margot called Bruno's name, trying to talk to him. Bruno looked at Margot, his voice trembling as he shouted, "What do you want me to say? That it wasn't your fault? That you shouldn't feel guilty? Well, I can't. You've been lying to me all this time. You knew about her asthma problems. Now I can't even look you in the face." After that, they started walking again, but now in silence, until they arrived at a roller coaster park. They stepped inside and Bruno immediately got on the roller coaster. When they sat down, Zoe nervously asked Bruno if the roller coaster was safe. She hated roller coasters and was scared of heights. Behind them, Margot sat alone, feeling down. Then a video appeared on the screen. It was Gremory. "Hello, friends! Congratulations on getting here! I know it wasn't easy, but you can be proud of making it this far. This roller coaster will lead to the exit of the park. Thank you for visiting, and I hope you enjoyed GremoryLand." With that, the roller coaster began to move, slowly climbing higher and higher. As the roller coaster moved upward, Bruno noticed something strange. It was the high ceiling of GremoryLand enclosing the entire park from top to bottom. At the very top of the ceiling, sprinklers sprayed water, making it look like it was raining inside the park. When the roller coaster reached the very top and was about to drop, the safety bars suddenly unlatched and the ride came to a stop. Zoe panicked, crying out that she couldn't take it, that she was going to fall. Bruno tried to calm her down, saying she wouldn't fall, and pointing out that he had spotted an emergency exit. Maybe they could get out through there. Bruno started climbing out of the cart, but Zoe yelled that it was too dangerous. As Bruno and Margot began walking down along the roller coaster track, Zoe shouted after them, asking if they were seriously doing it. While Bruno walked ahead slowly, Margot tried to catch up to him, calling his name and begging for forgiveness. She said that Bruno was right, that she should have told him everything, and that she had just been scared and hadn't reacted rationally. But Bruno answered coldly, "Margot, leave me alone. I don't want to hear from you again." Desperately, Margot cried, "Why are you doing this to me? How could I have known she'd have that asthma attack? It's not my fault her inhaler was empty." Upon hearing that, Bruno turned back to her and demanded, "How on earth do you know her inhaler was empty?" When Margot saw the look on his face, she realized she had just made a terrible mistake. She had said something she never should have. Because, back in the past, ever since Margot first met Bruno, she knew she wanted him to be part of her life. Eventually, she discovered that Bruno had a wonderful family, and the warmth of his home made her want to be part of it too. Little by little, Margot gained Bruno's trust and friendship until she became a necessary part of his life. For Margot, those were the best years of her life, just being with Bruno. But everything changed when Mia came into the picture. That day, when Margot picked up Mia from her piano lesson, they started walking toward the mountains. As they walked, Margot said she wanted to talk about what had been going on between them lately.
She told Mia that she had been preventing her from spending time with her brother. Mia looked at Margot and asked what she was talking about. At the top of the mountain, Margot said, "I've noticed that you're trying to push me away." Mia protested. "That's not true! I'm not trying to push you away. I just like spending time with my brother." But Margot replied angrily, "Don't play dumb with me. You almost never let me be alone with Bruno, and at family gatherings, you hardly even talk to me. Did you think I wouldn't notice?" Mia shouted, "Sometimes I just want to spend time with my family without you being involved." Margot snapped, "You're manipulative." Mia, furious, yelled back, "Manipulative? Who are you to talk to me like that? He's my brother. They're my family. What don't you get? Why are you always attached to us like a parasite? I've done my best to hide what was bothering me because I didn't want to hurt you, but I'm sick of it now. I won't pretend anymore. I'm going to talk about it with my family. I have the right to want to be alone with them." Before Mia could finish her words, she started coughing violently, gasping for air. She clutched her neck, struggling to breathe, and managed to say that her inhaler and bat was in her backpack, which Margot was holding. Margot slowly pulled the inhaler from the bag as Mia reached out her hand, begging for it. Mia fell to her knees pleading and asking Margot what she was doing, saying she needed the inhaler. Margot just stood there, watching as Mia struggled to breathe, reaching out for help. But instead of helping, Margot emptied the inhaler. Mia collapsed to the ground, gasping desperately for air. Crying, Margot ran away, leaving Mia on the top of the mountain, unable to breathe. As she cried, she grabbed her phone and texted Bruno saying that she was in the library. After Margot left Mia on that mountain, Mia eventually died. Upon hearing the truth, Bruno approached Margot and shouted, "You planned it! You took her there on purpose and you emptied her inhaler. That's why you wanted to leave GremoryLand in the middle of the first attraction. You were afraid that the park would reveal what you did. You were afraid that I'd find out you killed Mia." Suddenly, Margot ran toward Bruno and hugged him tightly, crying out, "I love you, Bruno! I want to be with you!" But Bruno struggled, pushing her away. "Back off! Let go of me!" he yelled. Margot kept pleading for forgiveness, begging through her tears. Then, desperately, she said, "If you forgive me, I'll tell you what I've discovered. I know who's behind all of this. Everything makes sense now. The park knew I wasn't in the library that day, because Gremory is—" Bruno cut her off angrily. "I don't care about your nonsense. Now let go. You're going to make us fall." But Margot cried out, "Promise! Promise me you won't leave me when we get out of here." Bruno yelled back, "When we get out, I'm calling the police. You'll pay for what you did." Margot looked at him with tears streaming down her face. "You're everything to me," she whispered. As Bruno tried to push her away, Zoe suddenly appeared from behind Margot and pulled her arms off Bruno, asking, "What are you doing?" Margot looked at Zoe and saw that she was shaking. Zoe was terrified of heights. Margot smirked and said, "Well, you'd better watch that foot. You could fall." Zoe looked down and saw how high they were. Her body trembled. Her legs weakened. Margot stared down at her and said coldly, "Huh, the brave and perfect Zoe, always preaching, always thinking you're better than everyone else. But look at you now, so vulnerable, crawling like a scared puppy. You're not better than me. You'll never be above me. Just the opposite. You're about to be very far below me." Margot raised her foot, trying to kick Zoe off, but Bruno jumped forward and pushed Margot away to stop her. Margot lost her balance, tripped over the rail, and began falling. Bruno froze, watching in horror as Margot fell to the ground below.
Then a flashback appeared, the six of them together, maybe celebrating after graduation. Zoe was smiling, saying that they wouldn't be coming back to school and that she would miss everyone. Becca looked at Zoe and said that they'd keep in touch, promising each other. Zoe replied, "Of course we will. Nothing will separate us." Then an image of Becca getting hit in the head flashed. Jax turned to Rami and asked if he was going to miss him. Rami replied and said, "We've known each other since childhood, but no, I won't miss a friend who made my life hell." Then an image appeared of Rami beating Jax to death. Becca looked at Margot and asked if she knew how Bruno was doing lately. Margot explained that ever since what happened to Mia, Bruno almost never left his room. Becca was surprised that he was still isolating himself for so long, saying it couldn't be good for his health. Margot said she knew Bruno wouldn't come to the party, but she was sure it was only a matter of time before he got back to normal.
Then, an image showed Bruno pushing Margot on the roller coaster. Zoe turned to someone else and asked, "What about you, Eva? Are you going to the party?" Eva smiled and said, "Yes, it's going to be amazing. It'll also be the best way to say my goodbyes before I move out of town." Then Jax raised his glass for a toast. "To our freedom," he said, and they all cheered together. Back in the present, Zoe tried to comfort Bruno, telling him it wasn't his fault, that it was an accident. She said that if he hadn't intervened, Margot would have killed her. Bruno stood up and said, "You're right." Then he reached out his hand to Zoe and said, "Let's just get out of this damn park and be done with it." But suddenly, the roller coaster cart's eyes started glowing red. Bruno and Zoe froze as the cart began to move toward them. Bruno grabbed Zoe's hand. "Run!" he shouted. They ran as fast as they could toward a staircase that might lead to an emergency exit. Zoe looked back and saw the cart racing after them. Just before it hit them, she and Bruno jumped onto the emergency stairs, landing safely. They looked at each other for a moment, breathless, shaken, then started descending in silence. At the bottom, they found a wooded area with a dirt path and began following it. As they walked, Zoe looked up and noticed a red X mark drawn on a tree. Bruno gasped as he saw the exit of GremoryLand right in front of them. They both felt a rush of relief and happiness. Finally, the end of this nightmare. But before they could move toward the exit, the panda appeared, blocking their way, holding a bloodied chainsaw. The panda raised the chainsaw and charged at them. Zoe and Bruno screamed and ran in different directions. Zoe stopped for a moment, thinking the panda hadn't followed her, but suddenly someone grabbed her hand and pulled her. Meanwhile, Bruno ran down another path, gasping for breath. He looked behind him, thinking the panda had gone after Zoe. But when he turned back, he saw the rabbit attacking him. Bruno barely dodged the blow and started running again. He finally reached the original path leading to GremoryLand's exit. He stopped, panting, and called Zoe's name, but instead of Zoe, the panda appeared again, still holding the chainsaw. Bruno turned and sprinted toward the exit as the panda chased after him. A blinding light shone from the exit, and Bruno's eyes went wide in shock. Then, the scene cut to white, leaving it unclear whether Bruno escaped or not. A new scene began. A woman stood on a mountain, speaking on the phone. On the other end, a voice asked if this was about her daughter. The woman replied coldly, "I'll handle the case myself. I'll do it for them. A group of friends doesn't just vanish without a trace like this." Then she hung up. Standing at the edge of the cliff, she whispered to herself, "I didn't want to say it, but yes, I'll do this for you, my beloved daughter. They were your schoolmates. I'll do this because I know what happened to you wasn't an accident. I'll do this because I don't believe in coincidences. I need to know who Gremory was, the one who terrified you so much. I need to find out who killed you, Eva."
Meanwhile, not long before Bruno and his friends visited GremoryLand, another group of friends had gone there first. They stepped out of the car, announcing that they had finally arrived. The plump girl, Judy, shivered and said that the entrance scared her and that she didn't want to go in. Her brother, Paul, reassured her, saying it was just the theme park and nothing could hurt her. Judy hesitated and asked if he was sure she would be safe. Paul confidently promised her that it wasn't even that scary. Ray, one of their friends, interrupted and asked Paul why he had even brought his sister along. Paul explained that their parents had to leave for an emergency and asked him to look after her. As they began walking toward the entrance, Ray was annoyed. Soon, they reached an information booth and started looking at the map. Paul asked Judy which area she wanted to explore first. She pointed to a witch island on the map and decided they should go there. Godric, on the other hand, smirked, thinking there might be attractive witches there. They followed the map and passed by the familiar exit of GremoryLand, the same one Bruno had seen. Along the way, Ray noticed a red X marked on a tree and suggested following it, thinking it would lead them the right way. They followed the red mark and eventually arrived at a foreboding dock where a tall, hooded figure awaited them with a boat. Godric hesitated at first, but Ray jumped into the boat without hesitation. One by one, they all boarded and began sailing toward the island. As the boat glided over the water, the tall, hooded figure's oar cut through the surface, and a floating human skull drifted alongside them. Moments later, they reached the Witch Island dock and disembarked. Walking toward the island, they came across a wooden sign with a warning. The yellow road was the only safe path.
and under no circumstances should they step off it. As they started along the yellow-bricked road, Godric spotted a broom and exclaimed, "Wow, so scary, the witch's broom." They continued walking, with Ray complaining that all they were doing was walking and that it was a waste of time. Suddenly, a loud, ominous sound echoed through the island. "What was that?" Godric asked nervously. Ray replied and said it sounded like some kind of animal, getting excited and suggesting it might be part of the attraction. Judy reminded them of the sign. They were only safe on the yellow road and shouldn't leave it. Ray rubbed his forehead and asked Paul to remind Judy that they were at a horror-themed park. Paul reassured her again, promising nothing would hurt her. Ignoring the warning, they stepped off the yellow path, using only their phone flashlight to follow the sound. They finally discovered its source, a giant deer. At first, Ray thought it must be robotic, but when the deer looked toward them, its face was horrifying. One eye missing, blood-soaked horns, and patches of disgusting fungus covering its face. Shocked, all of them screamed. The deer let out a terrifying cry and began chasing them. In the chaos, Judy tripped on a tree root and fell, fortunately landing back on the yellow road. Paul glanced back to see the deer pursuing them, but strangely, it stopped at the edge of the yellow path and didn't step onto it. The deer wailed again and walked away. Godric realized, oh, the sign, it's true, this road is safe. But then Paul noticed Ray was missing. He called out for him, but Godric assumed Ray was hiding to scare them. They resumed walking along the yellow road, only to hear a human scream. They froze and looked in the direction of the sound. "Is that Ray?" Paul asked, concerned. The scream didn't sound like a joke. Paul wanted to stay with Judy, but Godric insisted they should stick together to face the horror attraction. Paul reassured her it was just part of the attraction, yet Godric decided to go after the sound to find Ray, telling Paul to stay with his sister. As he ventured deeper, using only his phone flashlight, he spotted a rabbit lying dead on the ground, covered in the same creepy fungus. Following the foul smell, he saw another animal, dead with fungus, and there, standing nearby, was Ray, showing his back. Godric approached cautiously. "What are you doing here? You're just trying to scare me, right?" He grabbed Ray's shoulder. When Ray turned around, his face was terrifying, pale, eyes and mouth covered in fungus. Godric screamed and ran toward the yellow road. But when he reached the safety of the yellow path, Ray was standing there normally, waving alongside Paul and Judy. "What the heck? How? I just saw you in the woods full of those gross lumps," yelled Godric. Ray explained that he had been hiding to scare them, coming out after he left. Godric was unconvinced. "No, I know it was you. I'm not stupid." Paul intervened, trying to calm him, explaining Ray couldn't be in two places at once. Godric was confused, and Ray muttered that Godric really was an idiot. Frustrated, Godric cursed and began walking toward the exit. Suddenly, he froze in shock. The yellow road was cut off. They stopped and started talking. Godric didn't want to go any further because the yellow path was completely broken. Ray called Godric a coward, while Paul reminded them that they didn't come all this way just to leave because Godric got scared. With no choice, Godric decided to keep going. As they continued walking, stepping off the yellow road, Ray spotted something ahead, an old-looking abandoned house. They moved toward it and stopped in front of the entrance. Judy grabbed Paul's hand and whispered that she needed to pee. Paul told Ray and Godric to go on ahead and that they would catch up. Godric and Ray stepped inside the house using Ray's phone flashlight. Ray complained that everything would have been easier if Paul hadn't brought his simple-minded sister along. As they ventured deeper, they saw something ahead, a straw man sitting in a chair. Behind it was a small table. Ray and Godric approached and found a handwritten note. Ray picked it up and read aloud. "The animals are getting sick. It appears to be a sort of cancer. The lucky ones die within a few days, but the rest suffer in agony much longer. I hear them screaming every night from my window. It's horrible. It is no longer safe to walk through the forest. I'm sure it all started when that crazy old woman appeared on the island." They continued deeper into the house and saw a staircase leading to the second floor. They climbed up, eventually reaching a red door at the end of the stairs. Ray opened it and shone his flashlight inside. What he saw terrified him. A tall old woman with a deformed face, wide mouth, long fingers, an unnatural nose, and glowing red eyes. The woman spoke in a chilling voice. "Hello, Ray. I have been waiting for you." Ray froze in shock, mouth wide open before turning and sprinting downstairs. Godric followed, panicking, only to stop abruptly. The straw man was now standing in front of them, holding a bloody sickle. Godric asked Ray about the back door. Ray tried it. It was completely locked. Godric heard creaking footsteps behind him. The straw man was approaching, raising his sickle. Ray looked up the stairs and shouted that the witch is there. The witch began descending fast, laughing creepily. Screaming, Ray and Godric smashed the nearest window and leapt out to escape. Outside, Paul heard the glass breaking. Judy appeared saying that she was done and that they should catch up. But when Paul glanced toward the entrance, he saw the straw man standing there. At that moment, Ray and Godric appeared at the corner of the house, yelling that they needed to run. Godric frantically explained that they tried to kill them and they barely escaped through the window. Paul shouted back, "Have you both gone crazy? Just a few minutes ago you said..." But he didn't finish. The straw man swung his sickle, slicing the back of Paul's legs. Paul collapsed to one knee, screaming in pain as he saw the straw man looming over him. Godric grabbed Judy's arm and they ran, leaving Paul behind. Judy begged Godric to let go, saying she was worried about her brother. Then they heard Paul scream again. Judy looked back and saw Paul collapsing as the straw man struck him from behind. Judy shouted his name as they fled. But then they stopped. Ray was standing in front of them and asked why they had stopped. Godric explained that Judy didn't want to keep going, that she couldn't stop crying. Ray asked why Godric even brought her along, calling her useless. Godric said he didn't want to leave her. "I didn't want to repeat what happened before, But before he could finish, Ray interrupted, shouting that Judy was a burden. Their argument was cut short when a red glowing eye appeared on a tree beside them. Then more appeared, surrounding them. Suddenly, a hand appeared, grabbing Godric's leg and dragging him deeper into the trees. Ray immediately ran as a maniacal laughter echoed around him. He glanced over his shoulder and saw the witch standing still among the trees, watching him. He ran faster until he tripped over a rock and fell to the ground. When he looked back, the terrifying witch was reaching toward him.
Then the scene cuts to Eva's mom. It turns out she was a police officer and her name was Leslie. At that time, the court finally allowed them access to the private social media messages of the missing friends. Upon browsing, she saw the message of invitation from Gremory, saying that a pickup location would be revealed a few hours prior to departure. Then the scene cuts to the past, where she wakes up after hearing Eva's scream. She stands up and walks towards Eva's room, gun in hand. She arrives at the door and peeks inside, seeing Eva crying. She approaches her, saying Eva must have had another nightmare and scared her with her screams. But Eva panics and said it wasn't a dream this time. It was right there, standing exactly where Leslie is, staring at her with empty eyes. Leslie asks what Eva's talking about. Eva answers it was Gremory. Then the scene cuts to GremoryLand. Ray wakes up and finds himself inside a hanging cage. He notices Godric beside him and asks where they are. Below them, he spots Judy sitting alone. Ray asks Judy to get him out, saying that maybe the key beside her will free them both. Suddenly, the witch's laughter echoes. As Ray notices several human tongues hanging from the ceiling, the witch's voice speaks. "Judy, you were not meant to be in this park, so I offer you two options. You can use the key to free them both and face the horrors of Gremory together. Or you can do nothing, and I will show you the exit so you can go back home to your family. Which one will you choose?" Ray begs from inside the cage, telling Judy her brother would have taken the key and freed them. Judy responds that her brother, Paul, Ray didn't want to help him and now he's dead. She says Ray thinks she's useless because some things are hard for her, but she knows how to help people. Ray quickly replies that of course she can help, that she can help him right now, but Judy coldly answers that she's leaving and doesn't want to free them. Judy walks away safely, guided by Gremory. Cut to the present, back to Leslie. Her suspicion from the beginning has finally been confirmed. Both cases are connected to the park the friends visited, and the presence tormenting her daughter shares the same name. Leslie visits the family of one of the missing, specifically one who received the invitation to GremoryLand. She searches the room for hours but finds nothing useful. After some time, someone enters the room holding a clue that will lead her straight to the park. The identity of this person and the clue aren't shown, but Leslie immediately rides off on her police bike. The scene shifts back to Judy, arriving at the dock where they first started. Walking forward, she stops, remembering her brother being struck by the straw man from behind. The memory hits her and she screams. The scene shifts again. Leslie arrives at GremoryLand. Using only a flashlight to navigate, she hears a human scream and points her light toward the sound. At that moment, someone grabs Zoe's hand and pulls her inside, revealed to be Leslie. She asks Zoe what she's doing in GremoryLand. Zoe recognizes her instantly as Eva's mother. Leslie asks if Zoe is abducted too and how long she's been there. Zoe says maybe 10 hours and then asks if Leslie is trapped as well.
Leslie shows her a photo. She came to GremoryLand searching for Ray, Godric, and Paul, who've been missing for a long time. And they were Zoe's schoolmates. Zoe says they were Jax's friends, the same ones who bullied Rami in the past. She asks how Leslie found them. Leslie explains she discovered the invitation message on one of the missing friends' Instagram accounts, then visited their house to search for clues. Paul's sister appeared and confessed that she hadn't been home that night, even though her parents believed she was. She said she had been inside GremoryLand with her brother and their friends and managed to escape within a few hours when a car brought her back, making it seem like she never left. Zoe breaks down and hugs Leslie, saying horrible things happened and she can't take it anymore. Leslie asks if others are trapped, like Jax's friends. Zoe says Bruno might have reached the exit and asks if Leslie has seen him. Leslie says no. Zoe grabs him and insists they have to find him. They return to the original pathway while Zoe calls out Bruno's name. Then she points toward the exit, explaining they were running toward it before, and she's sure Bruno is somewhere beyond it. They enter the known exit pathway and find an elevator inside with music playing. Zoe presses the exit button and the elevator rises. Moments later, it suddenly drops again until reaching a final destination. Leslie looks outside, asking where they are. Her flashlight reveals a massive room with a black screen and a single chair. The chair turns around, revealing who's sitting on it. Leslie is shocked. It's Eva. Another flashback begins. At the graduation party, Margot is dancing, Zoe and Rami are happily together, while Eva sits with Becca. Eva asks if Becca is okay, but Becca only stares, completely drunk, calling Eva beautiful. Eva tells her it's her last drink, she has a big moving day tomorrow. Then Eva leaves the party. Outside, drunk, she says she shouldn't have finished that last one. Her vision blurs and she assumes it's the alcohol. Behind her, someone calls her name. It's Godric, asking if she's all right. Eva says she's fine and is going to take the bus. She stumbles and falls onto Godric, and he catches her, saying she's had too much and should go home. He guides her into a car. Eva sits in the middle seat, Ray and Godric on either side. Paul is driving. Because Eva is very drunk, they begin taking advantage of her, taking photos of her with Ray, planning to send them to their group chat. Back inside the bar, Jax watches Rami when his phone vibrates. He sees the photo and angrily messages the group, calling them idiots. He warns them that Eva is the daughter of a police officer. Panic hits the boys, especially since they had slipped something into her drink. They drugged her. Paul slams the brakes and argues that they should abandon Eva somewhere, that they don't want to go to jail. Without hesitation, Ray throws Eva out of the car, leaving her behind on the road. Eva's narration begins. Once upon a time, there was an unfair kingdom. If you did not want to be a princess, they would make you a witch. They threw me into the fire. What they didn't know was that after the flames, my ashes would feed the creation of a new world where we could be whoever we wanted, a place where we would silence those who kept us quiet for so long. It is revealed that the three killer mascots are Ray, Godric, and Paul. Their tongues were cut off so they cannot speak. The one Jax killed was likely Godric, one of his closest friends who bullied Rami. Then back in the present, Leslie is completely confused, saying that this can't be Eva, but Eva replies, "I am your Eva, and I feel very much alive." Zoe says it doesn't make sense, insisting they were Eva's friends, asking if Eva was behind GremoryLand all along. Eva answers, "Friends? A true friend would not have covered up what they did to me." Zoe, not knowing what Eva means, asks what they supposedly covered up. Eva calls them liars, saying that she only moved a few threads and yet they practically destroyed themselves in the park. She asks what that makes them. Zoe looks up at Eva and says, "You promised this was the exit of the park." Eva answers it is the way out, but you wanted to find Bruno first. He was captured by a mascot and is now hidden somewhere in this mansion. But this place is haunted and it does not like visitors. Every time the organ is played, the room you are in will turn hostile. When you are ready to look for him, enter the door in front of you. Move carefully or you may find yourself stuck here with Bruno forever. Leslie demands an explanation from her daughter, but Eva ignores her, saying they should hurry. She's about to start playing the organ. Zoe opens a door in front of them. Inside is an old-looking mansion with the full suit of armor standing against the wall. Zoe begins walking while calling out Bruno's name. Leslie asks if she's sure her phone has no signal. Zoe replies that they all checked many times and it's obvious Eva doesn't want them contacting anyone outside GremoryLand. Leslie says it's overwhelming that she should have taken Zoe out the moment she found her. Then from outside, Eva starts playing the organ. The music echoes to the mansion. Suddenly, the candlelight in the hallway goes out. Leslie and Zoe turn as they hear a metallic sound. The full suit of armor begins to move, now holding a sword in each hand. Its eyes glow green as it walks toward them. Zoe and Leslie run. At the end of the hallway, they realize there is no way out. Leslie looks back and sees the armor approaching. Zoe shouts that she found an open door. Leslie runs toward it with the armor chasing right behind her. The armor swings its sword, but Leslie leaps inside and slams the door shut just in time.
Inside the room, Leslie turned around and saw a disturbing sight. The words "I love you, Vanessa" were written on the wall in blood, and beside it hung a creepy portrait of an old-looking man. They walked farther inside, and Leslie noticed a newspaper lying on the table. She picked it up while Zoe spotted a nearby cabinet and decided to open it. The moment Zoe opened it, a loud thud echoed through the room. An old-looking man fell out of the cabinet, hitting the floor. He was a doll, just like Jeff. Leslie realized he must represent the medium who committed suicide for love, the very same story mentioned in the newspaper she was holding. She concluded that this must have been his place of work. On the table, they saw a Ouija board. Leslie sat down, overwhelmed, saying she needed a moment to think, that the girl she saw couldn't be her daughter, that this must all be some sick joke. But Zoe argued that what they were experiencing wasn't a joke at all, and that they needed to keep playing along if they wanted to find Bruno as soon as possible. They began using the Ouija board, hoping it might help them uncover something. Zoe asked where Bruno was, while Leslie called the whole thing absurd. Suddenly, the glass moved on its own and spelled one word: howdy. Right after that, the organ began playing again. The table started shaking violently and the lights in the room went out. Zoe pointed behind Leslie, telling her to look, but the corpse doll had disappeared. Leslie immediately suggested they leave the room, but before they could move, the creepy doll appeared behind Zoe with a twisted grin. Leslie shouted, "Behind you!" Zoe turned just as the doll attacked, wrapping its arm tightly around her neck. Its voice hissed, "Everything was a lie. She never loved me. She only wanted souls, and now she wants yours too. We cannot see the other side because it is impossible to exceed the speed of light, but they can watch you die in my hands." Leslie drew her gun and fired, hitting the doll precisely in the eye. It collapsed onto the floor. Leslie asked if Zoe was sure that thing was a doll. A moment later, they stepped out of the room. Leslie checked the hallway and told Zoe it was safe to come out. From the hall, Zoe noticed everything looked like it had been reset. Leslie confirmed the door in front of her was still closed. Then Zoe noticed the portrait hanging on the wall. This time she saw the nameplate, howdy, the same word from the Ouija board. Suddenly, the organ music started again. The armor in the hallway came back to life, its eyes glowing green. Leslie pointed her gun at it, warning Zoe that it was moving again. Zoe, on the other side of the hallway, tried to remove the portrait from the wall, thinking it must be a clue. Leslie fired multiple shots at the armor, but it didn't slow down. She shouted that they needed to go back to the medium's room. Meanwhile, Zoe finally managed to notice a hole in the man's mouth. Right beside her, she saw a pipe. She grabbed it and inserted it into the portrait's mouth. A door suddenly opened in front of her. Zoe called Leslie and they both rushed into the newly revealed room. Leslie immediately noticed that Bruno still wasn't there. Instead, at the center of the room hung a portrait of a hunter surrounded by multiple animal heads mounted on the walls, trophies of past hunts. Then, Leslie heard something behind her. The door had closed on its own. They began approaching the portrait in the center of the room and found a pistol resting on the hunter's desk. Leslie and Zoe looked back as the organ began playing again. At the same moment, blood started pouring rapidly from the mouth of the bear head and then from every animal head hanging on the walls. The blood flowed until it reached Zoe's foot. Leslie rushed to the closed door, banging on it, begging it to open. The rising blood was overwhelming, and within minutes the room was flooding. Zoe said they needed to do something fast. They frantically searched for anything that could help them escape. Zoe warned that at this rate they were going to drown. Leslie insisted they needed to open the door, telling Zoe there had to be a trick to get out. But Zoe replied that she didn't know either. As the blood kept rising, they saw a small hole in the ceiling, too small to climb through, but maybe large enough to breathe from. Leslie told Zoe to take a breath. The blood finally filled the room. Leslie submerged first, pushing her head into the hole to breathe. On the other side of the hole was another room. Inside sat a giraffe at a desk. Leslie's head now appeared mounted on the wall, just like the other hunting trophies. Zoe pulled Leslie back down, signaling that she needed to breathe too. Leslie moved aside and Zoe pressed her head into the hole. While breathing, Zoe immediately noticed something. She saw the pistol and then saw a lion in the room pointing at a dart on the door, the same dart they had inside the room. Zoe pulled her head out of the hole and swam downward toward the pistol. She grabbed it, aimed at the dart, and fired. The shot hit. The door burst open and blood flooded into the hallway. Zoe started gasping for air as Leslie asked if she was okay. A moment later, they stepped out of the room. The door that had been sealed earlier was now finally open. They rushed toward it. Inside, Zoe saw Bruno lying on the floor, bound tightly, his mouth sealed with tape. Zoe immediately ran to free him, but the knots were too tight. Leslie said there was a knife on the hunter's desk and that she'd get it. Meanwhile, Zoe peeled the tape off Bruno's mouth. The moment it came off, he gasped. Margot was right. She was right back on the roller coaster. She said Eva was alive. Eva is behind all of this. The organ music started again. Suddenly, the floor inside the room began opening beneath them. Bruno shouted that that was the only exit. Leslie returned with the knife, but before she stepped inside, Zoe stopped her, warning that the floor at the entrance had opened. Zoe told Leslie to throw the knife. Leslie threw it, and Zoe grabbed it. She immediately cut Bruno free, and Bruno stood at last. Bruno said the gap between the exit and the floor was too wide, that they wouldn't make it. At that moment, Leslie stormed toward Eva as she continued playing the organ. She begged her to stop, insisting she had no right to play with their lives. But Eva replied, "I have a life too, you know. I wanted to be a photographer. I wanted so many things. I worried my illness would keep me from my dreams. But the real danger wasn't inside me, it came from those around me. The devil is in the details. At first glance, they seem like ordinary people, just a group of friends. But they are psychopaths, criminals, liars. All I've done is unmask them." Leslie pointed her gun at Eva, telling her to stop playing. Eva asked what she thought she was doing and continued playing even faster. Inside the room, the floor under Bruno and Zoe continued disappearing. Eva hissed, "They're not good people. They're rats. Sorry, Mom, but it's time they face justice. Time to exterminate the rats." Leslie snapped, "Stop calling me Mom. You are not my daughter." She pulled the trigger and shot Eva. Flashback. Leslie wakes up one early morning to an urgent call. Someone found a body on the roadside. She was the first to arrive. The air was cold as she descended toward the cliffside where the caller pointed. Step by step, the cold crept up her body. She recognized a hair clip on the ground. She knew it instantly. She approached slowly and saw the body. Clearly, it was Eva. Her eyes were open, lifeless. Leslie went numb. She couldn't feel anything, only the crushing weight of grief. She whispered to herself it couldn't be real. She refused to accept it. She couldn't go on. She wanted to die too. At Eva's funeral, Zoe, Rami, Becca, and Jax stood among the mourners. Jax was panicking. Ray was blackmailing him, threatening that if the cops got a hold of their group chat, Jax would go down with them. Jax said he didn't want to be in the group anymore, but Ray threatened that if he said anything, he'd kill him. Meanwhile, Tim mourned loudly, placing Eva's photo at the casket. Back to the present. When Leslie fires the gun, inside the room, the floor started going back to normal. Zoe and Bruno rushed to Leslie. "That girl couldn't be my daughter," Leslie whispered. "Eva died a long time ago." Zoe looked toward Eva's body, now just sitting lifeless in the chair. "That couldn't have been Eva," she told her. "Stop torturing yourself. It was another trick of the park." She reached out and took Leslie's hand. They walked toward the elevator. Once again, Zoe pressed the exit button. The elevator rose until it reached the top. Zoe, Leslie, and Bruno rushed out, running toward the exit. A blinding light appeared at the end of the tunnel, and finally, they stepped back into the real world. A news report played next, covering the investigation into a group of missing friends inside an underground amusement park. Reporters stood at the gates of GremoryLand, explaining how the victims were forced into macabre tests to escape, and how police found the bodies of those who failed. The scene shifted again to a morning talk show, where some questioned how many bodies were still missing. One woman said it was absurd to believe a single young woman could have built GremoryLand alone. Another argued that Eva's body was never found and that the entire underground park was too strange to dismiss. The scene shifted again. A limousine drove through a remote countryside road. Inside, in the back, lay a mysterious coffin decorated with a cross.
Flashback to Jax's custom birthday party where Eva and Becca are together discussing the paranormal experiences they've had in their lives. Eva said that when she was a kid, she had a weird and terrifying experience. Becca got excited and demanded that Eva tell her the story. Eva began by explaining that when she was young, she sometimes visited her mother's friend. She loved going there because her mother's friend had a beautiful dog named Pinky. But despite her kindness, the woman always had a haunting look about her. One afternoon, Pinky wasn't in the living room with them, and the mother's friend told Eva that Pinky was surely in the garden. Eva went to the garden garden, but the strange stuff began when she tried to walk back to the living room. Every time she left the garden and walked down the corridor, she kept returning to the garden again and again as if she was caught in some kind of loop. Becca asked how Eva didn't see where she had come from. Eva said she was very young back then, so she guessed the door to the living room was somewhere, but she panicked, started crying, and ran in circles. Becca, excited, insisted they should visit that house someday and laugh about how easy it actually was to leave the garden. Meanwhile, on the other side of the party, Bruno was using a kind of fortune-telling device that showed the symbol of their soulmate from another universe. Bruno said that Rami's symbol was a star. Rami asked what that meant. Bruno explained the theory. There is a web of multiple universes, and their universe is just one of those threads. Margaret pointed out that she and Zoe had the same symbol but were nothing alike. Bruno replied that their shared symbol, a flower, meant they might not be similar in personality, but they would have similar impacts on adjacent universes. Zoe said she found that hard to believe, then asked what Eva's symbol was. Bruno used the device again, and Eva's symbol appeared. A spider. Around that time in the past, Eva had been having the same dream for weeks. In the dream, she was taking photos in her room when she heard a loud noise in the hall. The attic stairs were down. She thought maybe her parents had gone up there, but when she climbed the stairs, no one was there. She only saw a beautiful window she felt compelled to photograph, but when she looked through her camera, she saw it. Something forming in the attic, a mysterious figure growing in the darkness. Moments later, Eva received a text from Margot saying she wasn't going to the library. That's how Eva knew Margot was actually with Mia, so Eva went to Becca instead and suggested they visit the house from her childhood story. Standing outside the house, Eva said it looked exactly the same and wondered if her mother's friends still lived there. Inside, they found out that the house had been inherited and now belonged to the woman's grandchild. Eva apologized for their loss and asked if she could use the bathroom, though she was actually planning to go to the garden. The grandchild pointed her toward the left hallway, saying she'd find the bathroom easily. Eva walked down the hallway and saw the garden at the far end. In the garden, she saw Pinky's gravestone and felt sad. She turned around and saw two doors. Eva figured that maybe that was why she had walked in circles as a child. Maybe she used the wrong door. She stepped into one doorway, and as she walked, she saw a portrait of her mother's friend on the wall. But when she kept walking, she returned to the garden. Eva scratched her head, calling herself dumb, and tried again, following the exact same hallway. But once again, she ended up in the garden. Then she finally noticed a third door in the hallway, one she must have missed before. Eva opened it and entered the bathroom at last. She washed her hands, calming herself, telling herself it was just a childhood memory resurfacing. When she stepped out of the bathroom, everything had changed. It was completely dark outside. The garden was now bathed in night. Eva whispered that it couldn't possibly have gotten dark that fast. Something was terribly wrong. Then she saw it. The grave of Pinky was being freshly dug up. Eva panicked and ran down the hallway calling out for Becca, but the portrait of her mother's friend was gone, only the chair in the photo remained. At the end of the hallway, she saw someone. Eva approached, asking, "Becca, is that you?" But the figure turned around. It was her mother's friend, holding the skeleton of Pinky. In a trembling voice, the woman said, "Honey, it's been so long since I've seen you. Look, I dug her up to make space for you in the garden, so that you may take her place." Eva ran. She sprinted into the garden only to see something even more horrifying. There was a fresh gravestone with her name on it. The ground in front of it had been dug open. Her mother's friend approached slowly, whispering, "You can't escape your destiny. You're going to die, Eva." Eva climbed the wall in terror. She slipped, fell, and hit the ground with a loud thud. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer in the garden, but in her attic at home. A voice whispered to her. Eva approached her camera, trembling. The voice said, "You cannot see through the lens from which you are being watched, but they can see you." Eva used the camera, and through the lens, the mysterious figure formed again, becoming Gremory. She lowered the camera, and Gremory stood before her, smiling creepily. Eva screamed and woke up. Beside her was Becca, trying to calm her down. Eva sobbed, "Becca, thank God, something is wrong with me. I've been hearing voices for so long, and I'm starting to see things too. It's only getting worse. I'm scared. I think I'm losing my mind." Sometime after that, Eva told Becca she had been diagnosed with a type of schizophrenia. Eva didn't want to talk about it much, even though Becca sometimes wondered if Eva needed more help. But despite everything, Eva stayed optimistic. Becca deeply admired her for that. In the present, Leslie decided to dig up Eva's grave to confirm whether the person she shot was truly her daughter or an imposter. When the grave was finally opened, Leslie stared in shock. The coffin was completely empty. Eva's body wasn't there. Meanwhile, Zoe went to a psychiatrist because she felt suffocated with guilt about what she did to Rami. After everything Rami did, he had become dangerous, so she locked him up, hoping that once they escaped, the police would find him. But she couldn't help feeling helpless, afraid Rami might hurt her. The psychiatrist explained that her trauma was tied to her decision, telling her she needed to reassure herself that locking Rami up was the right call, that accepting her choices was the only way to find peace.
Later that night in her room, Zoe looked at an old photo of her and Rami on her phone. Suddenly, she received a notification from Becca's account. "Have you forgotten about me?" She froze, asking, "Who is this?" And saying this wasn't funny. Stealing the account of a dead friend to send creepy messages was a horrible joke. Becca replied, "You promised nothing would ever separate us. Since you couldn't keep your promise, I'm coming to look for you." The door to Zoe's room creaked open. A voice echoed from the hallway. "You've been invited." Zoe grabbed her phone, flashlight, and followed the sound. In the hallway, she found a Gremory doll lying on the floor holding a GremoryLand ticket. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Becca. "It's nice to be so near you again." Zoe saw a new image on her phone, a photo of her taken from behind, taken just seconds ago, by someone standing right behind her. Zoe gasped and the scene shifted to Bruno.
At Bruno's side, working his shift in the nursery home, he sent Zoe a text asking if she was okay. Moments later, one of his coworkers arrived, frustrated, explaining that one of their patients still refused to take her pills and that she should already be home by now. She complained that the constant rain lately had made the patients more irritable than usual, the thunderstorms keeping them awake at night and leaving everyone exhausted. Hearing this, Bruno gently encouraged her to go home, assuring her that he would handle the patient's medication, reminding her that he was on night shift anyway. Grateful, his coworker thanked him repeatedly, saying she owed him one before finally heading out. A moment later, Bruno made his way toward the patient who refused her medicine. He entered the room and greeted her softly. He said, "Hello, Mrs. Wolpert. How are you this evening?" Mrs. Wolpert replied that she was doing very well because she was getting married, and when she told her mother about it, her mother was so happy. Bruno, holding the medicine in his hands, told her he was glad to hear it, and that her mother also reminded him she needed to take her medication. But Mrs. Wolpert continued, explaining that when she told her father she was getting married, he yelled at her and called her dirty and a sinner for getting pregnant, admitting she always became terrified whenever her father acted like that. Later that night, while Bruno was quietly reading during his shift, he noticed an alarm flashing from Mrs. Wilpert's room on the monitor. Seeing this, he stood up and walked down the hallway toward her door. He opened it and found her standing beside the window, staring silently at the rain. Bruno approached her and asked gently if the storm was keeping her awake, but instead Mrs. Wilpert muttered that he's very angry about what you did. That's why he's come looking for you. Confused, Bruno asked who she was talking about. Mrs. Wilpert answered, "Don't you see him? He's just down there." Bruno looked out the window toward where she was staring and froze. Outside, in the pouring rain, someone was standing completely still wearing a raincoat. Bruno couldn't believe what he was seeing. There really was someone out there. Then suddenly, Mrs. Wilpert grabbed his wrist and screamed, "Why didn't you show up at the altar? Why did you abandon me? We were going to be parents. We were going to be a family." At that exact moment, the figure outside threw a rock at the door's glass panel. The glass shattered and the person stepped inside the building. As the stranger walked forward, Mrs. Wilpert cried out, "I love you. I want to be with you. You are everything to me." Hearing those words, Bruno remembered the exact same line Margot once told him back at the roller coaster attraction. Then a heavy thud echoed from the hallway. Bruno turned toward the sound, and there the figure stood, now at the doorway of the room. The raincoat dripped water onto the floor. The stranger slowly raised its hand, revealing a syringe filled with an unknown substance. In a cold, emotionless voice, the figure said, "You've been invited." Meanwhile, in the past, shortly after Eva passed away, her parents, Tim and Leslie, were arguing. Leslie demanded to know why Tim had allowed Eva to go to the party without consulting her first. Tim insisted that Eva deserved to have a good time, especially after everything she had gone through with her hallucinations. But Leslie argued back, saying this was exactly why Eva shouldn't have gone. Eva was on medication, and she could not risk drinking. Tim said he didn't believe Eva would drink at all. Leslie pointed at him, accusing him of always wanting to be the good cop, the cool dad, but saying that this time he went too far and acted irresponsibly. Tim fired back, saying Leslie was always strict, that everything to her was about rules. Hearing that, Leslie ordered Tim to get out of the house, saying she didn't want to see him anymore. With nothing else to say, Tim left, walking away in silence and sorrow. Time passed. At a motel, Leslie visited him. She knocked on the door, and when Tim opened it, she immediately asked if they could talk. Inside the room, Leslie asked how he was doing, and Tim explained that he was planning to move into the house he inherited from his parents, an old funeral home, saying that perhaps it was time to go back to his roots. Leslie apologized for how she spoke to him the last time. She said that with everything that had happened, she was struggling to stay strong. Tim tried to comfort her, saying it wasn't her fault, but his. He told her that things could be fixed and that he was glad she visited because he had something important to share. Back in the present, a late-night television program discussed the GremoryLand incident. As Leslie flipped through a photo album, one woman questioned who had been driving the limousine the survivors mentioned.
The other pointed out that not everyone has access to a limo, implying powerful people might be involved. As Leslie stared at an old photo of her and Tim standing in front of the funeral home, a realization struck her. She whispered, "It wasn't a black limo. It was a hearse." Immediately, Leslie grabbed her motorcycle keys and sped toward the funeral home. Soon, she arrived at the old, decaying building. She knocked on the entrance door, but no one answered. With no other choice, she searched for another way in. She found a nearby window, forced it open, and climbed inside. Once inside, Leslie called out Tim's name while scanning the room. Then she noticed a door slightly ajar. She approached it, pushed it open, and inside saw a black vehicle, the same one suspected of transporting those who were invited to GremoryLand. Then she noticed another open door. Without hesitation, she followed it and arrived at the mortuary. There, lying on a metal surface, she saw a ticket. It was identical to the GremoryLand ticket Zoe had found. Immediately, Leslie called to report what she had discovered, telling the person on the other end that she had found the GremoryLand vehicle and the car was in her ex-husband's house. But as she spoke into the phone, someone appeared behind her. It was the same figure in the raincoat, the very same one that stood outside Bruno's window. And as Leslie was about to end the call, the raincoat-bearing figure was now standing right behind her. Then the scene shifted to Zoe. As she lay on the ground and slowly opened her eyes, she was shocked by what she saw. It was the same GremoryLand entrance, but now it appeared more terrifying and deadly. The entire entrance was covered in blood. Zoe tried to run, desperate to escape, but at the end of the path, she found only a tall, unscalable wall. She shouted for help, calling out into the empty darkness. Suddenly, a small cart appeared on the tracks, as if inviting her to get inside. With no other choice, Zoe climbed into the cart. Immediately, metal strains snapped tightly around her legs, preventing her from running away. The cart began to move, slowly carrying her deeper inside. As it rolled forward, Zoe arrived at the statue of Gremory pointing in two directions. In its distorted voice, Gremory asked where she wanted to go. To the left, he said, is the Museum of the Sleepers. To the right is the exit of GremoryLand. Hearing this, Zoe realized it couldn't possibly be that simple, that it might be a trick. She wondered if Gremory meant his right, not hers. So Zoe chose the right side of Gremory, hoping she had outsmarted him. But the cart still carried her straight toward the Museum of the Sleepers. No matter which direction she chose, she was always meant to end up there. Meanwhile, Bruno slowly opened his eyes as well, wondering where he had been taken. Inside the dim room, he saw a popcorn container at a cup of drink with a handwritten note taped to it. "Drink to begin movie." Bruno staggered toward the door and tried to open it, but his legs felt weak. The memories of what had happened rushed back. His instinct told him he was inside GremoryLand again. After some time, with no other options, Bruno decided to drink the soda with an unknown substance inside the cup. He grabbed it, took a breath, and drank. As the last drop went down, the door slowly creaked open. Bruno stepped out and found himself inside a small cinema. Rows of chairs waited for him. Knowing he had no choice, he sat down. The scene in a projector flickered on by itself, and the movie began to play. Then the scene shifted again to Leslie, who jolted awake from her sleep. She asked herself if everything that happened at the funeral home had been a dream. But then she heard a doorbell ringing. Leslie wondered who could possibly be at her door so late at night. She opened it. What she found on the other side was impossible. She was staring directly into one of GremoryLand's attractions. She was standing face to face inside the Happy Family attraction.
Meanwhile, Zoe had finally arrived at the Museum of the Sleepers. She opened the curtain and there he was again. As usual, Jeff was standing in front of the static-filled TV. The screen flickered, revealing a new message. New exhibition. Zoe slowly walked past Jeff, heading into the next room. There, she saw a new addition to the displays. Several miniature lit houses. Inside one of them, a silhouette showed a little girl with her father. Below it, another silhouette depicted the girl grown up, crying at her father's grave. The next display showed a mother, father, and daughter together, and below it, the father was violently beating the mother. The final frame revealed the father pointing a gun at the mother. As Zoe moved forward, she found a brand new exhibit, and it was none other than Becca. Zoe leaned close to the frame, calling Becca's name. Becca turned to her, but Zoe quickly realized it wasn't truly Becca. It was a puppet wearing Becca's face. The puppet began to dance as it spoke. "We were invited to this park thinking that it would be free, but once inside, we discovered the price, and we paid it. We are just puppets for entertainment." Hearing Becca's voice, Jeff suddenly stirred. His track creaked to life, and he began moving. Zoe heard the sound and spun around. Jeff was approaching holding a baseball bat. Panicking, Zoe ran, but Jeff abruptly stopped. His track had reached its end. He couldn't continue. Seeing this, Zoe crusted him, even flipping him off in frustration. But then something impossible happened, something Jeff had never done before.
Jeff stepped off the track. He began walking toward her. Zoe froze for a moment, shocked, then bolted. As she ran, she slipped and fell onto her back. Jeff stepped closer, raising his hand, now holding a taser. He swung it toward her, but Zoe kicked his leg, sending him crashing down. Zoe scrambled to her feet and saw a small winter lodge ahead. Jeff's family emerged from it, shouting and berating her for what she had done. Meanwhile, Jeff's eyes glowed an eerie red, turning even more hostile. As Jeff tried to stand, his arm suddenly broke off, spilling thick green ooze from the wound. From the stump of his severed arm, a machine gun extended, pointing straight at Zoe. She ran. Jeff fired wildly, bullets sprang everywhere, but miraculously missing her. As Zoe sprinted, the floor beneath her collapsed, dropping her into the level below. She survived the fall. When she looked up, she recognized someone. On the other side of glass wall stood Wami, staring at her. Then the scene shifted to the past. Zoe's father was screaming at her mother, striking her during yet another violent argument. Zoe stood up and shouted at him, telling him not to touch her mother. Her father pointed at Zoe, ordering her to stay out of it. Her mother begged Zoe to go back to her room. That moment became the source of Zoe's lifelong trauma. Later, at a restaurant with her friends, Zoe overheard a news report on a nearby TV. It spoke of a man who murdered his wife and then committed suicide by jumping from the 5th floor. That night, her parents fought again. Zoe quietly filmed them, recording everything. One day, while Zoe washed dishes, her father, watching TV, scoffed loudly. He said the shows were garbage, full of women who look like men and men who look like women, claiming entertainment was pushing a political agenda. Zoe fired back that people like him were the real problem. Her father grew furious and started walking toward her. But before he could reach her, Zoe pulled out her phone and showed him the video. "Don't you dare touch me. See this? I have many copies of what you call normal. If you don't leave right now, I'll send it to the police and you'll end up behind bars." Her father froze. Realizing he had no power left, he obeyed her and left the house. Her mother, however, didn't understand. She asked her husband what she had done wrong, unaware that Zoe had threatened him. From that day onward, everything changed for Zoe. The constant fear and draining anxiety vanished. She felt alive again, full of energy. She finally felt like she could enjoy her life, like she was waking up from a nightmare. But one day, returning home with a smile, she saw something that shattered her peace. Her father was back, kissing her mother on the 2nd-floor balcony. Zoe desperately tried to convince her mother that he didn't love her. She said abuse was not love, but her mother insisted it was her own fault, that she always made mistakes, and that her husband simply couldn't control his emotions. She told her she was terrified, that she couldn't keep watching him hurt her mother, that one day he might kill her, and maybe he would eventually start hitting Zoe too. She begged her to choose, her daughter or her husband. Her mother whispered that she couldn't choose. At that moment, Zoe understood everything. She went to her room. Her mother followed, asking where she was going. Zoe answered softly, "To a better place." Her mother cried out, saying Zoe was being unfair, that she couldn't force her to choose between the two people she loved. Zoe said nothing. She simply walked away from the house.
Back in the present, as Zoe saw Rami, she slowly walked toward him and asked what he was doing there. Rami replied by asking why she was surprised. After all, she was the one who ditched him in GremoryLand. Zoe quickly explained that her plan had been to escape and then tell the police where she had locked him, saying she had no choice, that Rami had been out of control and she feared he would hurt someone else. Rami looked at her and said that Zoe was supposed to be his best friend, that he expected a little understanding from her. But Zoe fired back, asking, "Understanding? You killed Jax. How do you expect me to accept that kind of violence?" Rami responded calmly, saying that violence is innate in everyone, but society demonizes it so that only the powerful can wield it. Zoe argued that violence only creates pain and fear, and it's impossible to build anything good or lasting from emotions like that. Rami told her that he once lived exactly like she did, constantly worrying about the consequences of his actions, insecure, afraid, never knowing if he was truly the best version of himself. But now he believed he was stronger, because he stopped judging himself and denying who he truly was. Then, suddenly, Rami flicked his finger. A blinding light appeared. On the other side of the glass, Zoe saw the silhouette of a man tied to a chair, his mouth covered. It was her father. Zoe turned to Rami, demanding to know why her father was there. Rami answered strangely, telling her she should have picked up those calls, that he was sorry. Then behind her father, a television screen turned on. A news anchor spoke. "We're starting with some sad news tonight. Violence against women continues in a heartbreaking trend this year as another woman was murdered by her husband. The victim, a 47-year-old woman, had tried to escape an abusive situation, but her husband caught her, beat her, and locked her up. Phone records show she attempted to contact her daughter.
It seems she did not have time to contact anyone else, for he did not stop at beating her. In the end, he shot her. Zoe froze. Her eyes widened as she stared at her father through the glass. Rami spoke softly, telling Zoe that her father was there so she could make him pay for everything he had done, that he killed her mother and ran away, that he felt no regret for any of it. He pointed at a red button beside Zoe and said that if she pressed it, her father would disappear from the world forever. Hearing this, overwhelmed by memories of her trauma, Zoe clenched her fist. Her anger surged. She glared at her father and rushed toward the button. She lifted her hand ready to slam it down, but she stopped. Her hand froze inches above the button. Instead, she slammed her fist against the glass separating them, crying out that she couldn't do it. She called for her mother and broke down in tears. Rami stared at her, confused, and asked why she wanted to save him. Zoe replied that she did want him to pay, but in the right way. She wanted the world to see what monstrous things he had done, for the law to punish him. Then Rami sat down, sighing as he confessed the truth. He said Zoe's mother was actually fine, that those phone calls had been Zoe's mother trying to tell Zoe she finally left her husband. He explained that he had assumed Zoe's values were superficial, beliefs forced onto her like the ones his own parents imposed on him. He admitted he thought Zoe would break the same way he did. But I was wrong, Rami said. Zoe asked if everything had been a test of her beliefs. She said that the world could change if people stopped limiting others into roles, admitting she herself had been wrong and she had tried to learn from it. Rami explained further. When Zoe locked him in that room, he was furious. But in the dark, alone with his thoughts, the memory of Jax's death haunted him. He realized he didn't feel any satisfaction, not even after everything he had done. The only thing he felt was sadness. He apologized to Zoe, saying he was sorry he had to trick her, to push her to the edge and hope she would press the button. Suddenly, the floor on Rami's side began to tremble. The platform started descending. Zoe panicked, asking him what was happening. Rami said he was glad he failed the test, that he didn't want Zoe to be trapped like he was. So he asked again why the floor was lowering, why he was being taken away. Rami answered quietly, "They're taking me where someone like me deserves to be." Zoe insisted she could help him escape, but Rami replied that after everything he had done, there was no future for him outside of GremoryLand. With his final words, he vanished into the darkness below.
Meanwhile, on Bruno's side, as he sat in the cinema, the title of the movie appeared, The Actress. Margot appeared on screen riding her bicycle toward the airport. At the arrival area, she watched a family greeting each other with warm smiles, and she quietly admired their happiness. When Margot was young, she barely remembered her own childhood. What she did recall was a house that was always dark, always cold. One day, she was taken to a gloomy boarding school where she met others like her. But even there, the cold never left because she discovered something far worse: loneliness. It crawled down her throat like something alive, burning her from the inside as it suffocated her. Then someone appeared, and everything changed. A man stood before young Margot, her future adoptive father. He adopted her to give her a bright future. One day, he asked her what she wanted to be when she grew up. Margot answered, an actress. Soon after, he enrolled her in a wonderful acting school. Margot always looked for him in the crowd during performances. He always came. He never wanted to miss even one of her shows. But time passed. Her adoptive father grew sick. Still, whenever Margot was afraid to step onto the stage, she remembered his words that always gave her courage. Then came the day he missed one of her performances. A terrible message reached her. Her adoptive father had died of his illness. Even after the funeral, she refused to accept it. It wasn't until her aunt moved in that Margot was forced to face the truth. One day, Margot reminded her aunt that she would be late for acting class if they didn't leave soon. Her aunt told her she wasn't going. Margot insisted they were practicing something important that day. Her aunt snapped, irritated, saying Margot would not attend acting classes anymore. Margot asked why. Her aunt replied coldly that her brother, Margot's adoptive father, had been dead for only 3 months, that Margot should be mourning, not thinking about classes. She accused Margot of convincing her brother to spend money on her whims instead of extending his own life. She pointed at Margot, saying, "If it weren't for you, my brother might still be alive." Time passed. Her aunt turned Margot's room into a gym area, and Margot was moved to a dusty, dim space. The place she once called home became the coldest, loneliest place she ever known. Years later, Margot had grown older. As she walked downstairs, her aunt asked her where she was going.
Margot answered that she was taking a bike ride along the river, as usual. Her aunt said that from now on, Margot would stay home and clean, and that the money she earned on weekends would go toward household expenses. That was the day Margot rode her bicycle toward the airport. And at the airport, as she sat and watched another happy family, when she wished she could have, she noticed something, a familiar face. Bruno. Margot was stunned. Bruno was equally surprised to see her. He approached and asked what she was doing at the airport, if she was waiting for someone. Margot lied, saying she was waiting for a friend, but the flight had been canceled and she was about to leave. Then she asked what he was doing there. Bruno explained he had just returned from Japan. He'd been an exchange student. Then his mother appeared and asked who he was talking to. Bruno introduced Margot as his classmate. Bruno's mother greeted her warmly and invited her to dinner at their home. Margot tried to decline, saying she didn't want to bother anyone and would just cook something at home. But Bruno's mother insisted, saying she wasn't a bother at all, it was settled. Margot was coming. Mia also invited her kindly, saying they had something special planned to celebrate Bruno's return. Later that evening, at Bruno's house, they shared a happy dinner, exchanging stories. Margot felt something she hadn't felt in years, warmth, a sense of belonging. But all of that disappeared the moment she returned home. Her aunt sat comfortably, laughing at her favorite TV show while Margot scrubbed the floor, exhausted and irritated. At work, she endured customers yelling at her. Her life felt miserable. One night, overwhelmed, Margot ran from the house to Bruno's home. Rain soaked her from head to toe. She stood outside the window watching Bruno's family share a warm, comforting evening together, a family she never had. Then time shifted back to the moment Margot left Mia behind on the mountain to die. After that incident, Margot rushed to her room, breathing heavily. But then she noticed something. Her piggy bank, shattered, empty. The money she had saved from her part-time job, gone. She stormed to her aunt, shouting, demanding to know what she had done. "Who gave you permission to break my piggy bank?" Her aunt replied coldly that she had already told Margot her earnings would cover household expenses. But Margot yelled back, furious, saying her aunt had no right to take that money. Her aunt replied sharply, calling Margot a spoiled brat. She said Margot should be grateful she didn't die in the shithole that her brother found her in. At those words, Margot snapped. She rushed at her aunt, grabbing the necklace around her neck. She shouted, "I am so sick of you. I am not your maid. I am not your puppet. You've treated me like garbage for years while living in my father's house like a queen." Her aunt screamed back that if Margot felt mistreated, she could leave any time. Margot grabbed a shard of broken glass from her piggy bank and pointed it at her neck. She told her to shut her mouth, that Margot would leave the house, but her aunt would hand over all the jewelry she bought with her father's money. After that night, Margot moved out and began living on her own. She found a small, shady apartment downtown, cramped, dim, and constantly humming with the noise of traffic below. And in that lonely space, she pushed forward in pursuit of her dream, to become an actress. But things were not going according to plan. Her auditions led nowhere, her savings were almost gone, and slowly desperation began to whisper in her ear. One night, Margot made a decision, one she never thought she would take. She put on an expensive-looking dress, borrowed makeup she could barely afford, and went to a club rumored to be frequented by industry people. Under the neon lights and chaotic music, she intentionally bumped into the director on the dance floor, a director known for giving newcomers a chance. That single moment was enough. A few drinks later, laughter shared, feigned chemistry exchanged. They became closer. Close enough that Margot leaned into seduction, believing this was her only way forward. Later that night, they slept together. Margot used her body in hopes of being chosen for the audition. She convinced herself it was a sacrifice, a necessary step to survive. But everything shattered when the director told her coldly that she wasn't the first, and she wouldn't be the last. "Everyone tries the same trick," he said dismissively, "and it rarely works." Margot felt the ground disappear beneath her feet as she walked home in silence, her heart breaking a little more with every step. Her cheap heels snapped, leaving her limping through the streets. A passing car drove through a puddle, splashing dirty water all over her clothes, soaking her completely. By the time she arrived at her apartment, she was drenched, exhausted, and defeated. She peeled off her wet clothes, dropped to the floor, and finally broke. She screamed, long, raw, and desperate. She yelled that she couldn't take it anymore, that everything she had fought for was falling apart, that life had done nothing but crush her dreams one by one. In the middle of her breakdown, her phone buzzed with a notification. Margot checked it. It was their group chat. They were talking about GremoryLand. And she saw Bruno's message. He was coming too. He said he couldn't wait to see everyone again. Then she made a decision.
she would go to GremoryLand as well. This was the end of Margot's life before GremoryLand and the beginning of everything that would follow.
At the present, after Bruno watched all of that, the curtain in the cinema opened, and there Margot appeared. But strangely, Bruno mistook Margot for Mia. Margot had copied Mia's hairstyle and outfit, a clear sign of desperation. She approached Bruno slowly, and only then did he finally recognize this wasn't his sister, it was Margot. As sweat began pouring down his face, Margot said, I see the drink has started to take effect. It turned out the drink Bruno had earlier was drugged, and it also had Viagra mixed into it. Bruno told Margot he wasn't feeling well, asking her what she had done to him. He looked at her again, but his vision blurred from the drug. His legs gave out and Bruno collapsed onto the ground. In that moment, Margot crawled toward him, trying to force herself onto him, whispering that she knew he didn't want to hurt her, that she could see it in his eyes. Margot went on saying, "Ever since I met you, I've tried to get closer to you, fit into your life, share your likes and hobbies, but there was always something in the way. I know you love me. Unlike me, you just haven't found a way to express it. Gremory told me that sometimes getting close isn't enough, that I must go further, and so I want to show you how I feel inside." Her eyes welled up as she stared at him. She said she had been waiting so long for this moment. Bruno covered his eyes as tears fell. Seeing that, Margot asked if he was crying. Bruno told her, "If you loved me, you wouldn't be doing this to me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have taken away my sister. You would have known how much she meant to me and you took her away." He told her she always believed she had an excuse, that everything made sense in her head, yet all she ever created was pain. She destroyed everything around her. Through heavy sobs, Bruno said he didn't want someone like her in his life. Meanwhile, on Leslie's side, she turned around and walked toward her window. But when she pulled the curtain aside, the window was gone, replaced with solid concrete. With no other choice, Leslie climbed into the giant stroller. The stroller began moving deeper into the house. As it rolled forward into another room, the voice of the mother echoed through the darkness. She spoke, "The worst thing a mother can suffer is losing her child. It can drive her to do crazy and impossible things, all to see her again. But," the mother turned around smiling, "but not all mothers love their children. Do they, Leslie?" Suddenly, the lights went out. Leslie reached into her coat pocket, grabbed a flashlight, and switched it on. The beam revealed a severed leg. Then she had the mother's voice again. "If you want it bad enough, miracles can happen." The mother suddenly appeared in front of her, making Leslie shocked. The mother pressed her thumbs into her eyes, smiling as she whispered, "Always so tough and bossy. You were a terrible mother." Leslie swung her flashlight, striking the mother, and the stroller lurched forward again. She looked behind her and saw the mother's body lying motionless on the track. The door to the next room opened. Leslie drew the gun from her pocket and pointed ahead alongside her flashlight. What she saw was a group of terrifying, creepy dolls, and in front of her stood the family's son, crying. Leslie asked the little boy what he was doing and if he was lost. The boy whispered, "My sister. Her name is Eva. She was born after she died. But you killed her again." Suddenly, the boy bent backwards unnaturally and began crawling toward Leslie. On the other side, a baby's voice began repeating "Mama" over and over. Leslie swung her flashlight and saw a baby doll walking slowly toward her. The sun appeared right in front of Leslie, startling her so badly she pulled the trigger, shooting through the doll's face. Then once more, the mother's voice filled the room, now furious. "What have you done?" Leslie turned around and saw the mother rushing toward her with a knife. The stroller moved again just as the mother chased after her. The next room was a hellish chamber. Beneath the track, it looked like real molten lava. The giant, terrifying baby from before rose from the lava, its eyes locking onto her. It swung its massive arm, breaking the track behind her. The baby began chasing her down as she shut her eyes tightly, the stroller racing forward. Finally, the door to the final room opened. The ride glided inside and stopped. Leslie opened her eyes and froze. Standing there was the very person who brought her and the others to GremoryLand, the figure in the raincoat. The person removed his hood. It was her ex-husband, Ava's father, Tim. Then the scene shifted again, back to the past when Tim told Leslie he could fix everything, that everything would be fine after Ava's death. Moments later, they entered a room where Leslie noticed several pinned papers on a board. She asked Tim what they were.
Tim told her to sit down so he could explain. Tim began describing what he'd discovered. He said that everything they perceive around us exists because of light, and that light travels at a constant speed that cannot be surpassed. Leslie stared at him confused, unsure what he meant. Tim continued saying that time varies depending on the observer, the core of Maliva Marich's theory of relativity. That every time they run or move through the world, they're actually traveling through time and space. But their movements were insignificant, too slow to notice. If they could move faster, close to the light speed, he believes time could be bent, that perhaps they could even see Ava again. Leslie, now uneasy, asked him what he was talking about. None of it made sense to her. She thought Tim had become obsessed. Tim apologized, saying he had been shut inside for days, overthinking. Leslie gently told him he could move back into their home again, that they could help each other heal. But that night, Tim couldn't sleep. He sat alone searching online for answers. Hours passed. Eventually, he became convinced that someone had already broken the limits of the universe, someone watching from the outside. He claimed that light itself came from the creator. Then suddenly, a blinding light appeared, an image of the supposed creator emerging within it. The vision overtook him, transforming his perception into something surreal, where he saw himself in a spaceship, aiming a gun at someone. And in front of him appeared an image of Leslie, also pointing a gun at him. The image of Leslie spoke, "Let's free ourselves from the material universe. Jump out so we can see Ava again. Shoot me, my love." Just as Tim was about to pull the trigger, reality snapped. He found himself standing inside Leslie's room, his gun pointed straight at her. Leslie, terrified, asked what he was doing. Tim looked just as shocked. Leslie questioned why he had her gun. Tim glanced down, realized the weapon wasn't his, dropped it in panic, and bolted out of the house. He ran through the woods faster and faster until a blinding light appeared once more. The being's image returned. Tim heard its voice clearly. "You can call me Gremory. Your nature does not allow you to see beyond the limits, but I sensed your suffering and I have approached from the other side." Tim whispered, "Gremory, that's the name my daughter used to repeat." The being responded, "Tim, there is an end to your suffering. I am here to help you get Ava back." Gremory gave him instructions. First, Tim had to sneak into his ex-wife's house to retrieve something. Night after night, Ava had projected him back through dreams until she helped him appear. Above Ava's old room, Tim found the costume of Gremory. Gremory then ordered Tim to go to the cemetery to retrieve his daughter's body. Tim obeyed. After recovering Ava's remains, he drove far away, deep into the woods, somewhere people rarely visited. Gremory commanded him to dress Ava's body in the costume, bury her again, and leave. He was not to return until 7 days had passed. Tim did exactly as he was told. Then after Tim left, a strange light, sharp and focused like a laser, struck the ground where Ava had been buried. And finally, 7 days later, Tim returned to the exact same spot. What he saw made him stop in disbelief. The burial site was no longer just earth and soil. The ground where Ava had been buried, near it was an entrance leading underground. Tim followed the path. It carried him deeper beneath the earth, winding until it opened into a strange chamber. What he saw froze him where he stood. In front of him was a casket, standing upright, thick, glowing red veins growing across its surface.
Back in the present, Leslie stared at Tim and demanded to know what all of it meant. Tim told her this is what he had been trying to explain all along, that they were prisoners inside their universe, but Gremory had heard him from beyond it. Leslie asked if Gremory was the one who created everything around them. Gremory explained that Gremory was part of what existed beyond their reality, capable of reading their time like an open book. Gremory could navigate freely from present to past, and Eva had been used as a seed to build the park, a system created at the very edge of their universe, the only place where Eva could continue to exist. Then, without warning, Eva appeared, sitting in a wheelchair. She looked directly at Leslie and said, "Hello, Mom." Immediately afterward, Eva ordered Tim to take Leslie's gun before she tried to shoot her again. Tim reached out his hand towards Leslie, asking her gently to give him the gun. Leslie hesitated, confused and overwhelmed, unable to process what was unfolding. Eva snapped at Tim, telling him to hurry and take it, or they would do things the hard way. Tim begged again, asking Leslie for the gun, assuring her it was for the good of all of them. Leslie answered that none of this was good for anyone, but even so, she handed her gun to Tim. Tim told her she'd soon see it was the right choice. But suddenly, Eva said coldly, "Now shoot her. She has no choice but to stay here forever." Tim froze. He refused, but Eva insisted, saying that if he didn't, Leslie would escape and ruin everything. Slowly, Tim raised the gun and pointed it at Leslie's head. Leslie stepped forward, voice steady, and asked him, "Are you going to finish what you tried that one night?" Tim remembered the night he had almost pulled the trigger. His hands trembled. Leslie kept walking toward him. She said a broken world was easier to control, and that was exactly what Gremory was doing to everyone in the park. He had preyed on their wounds, manipulated their suffering until they became fuel for his sick system, a system ruled only by psychopaths. Leslie asked Tim if he truly wanted to become one of them. Everything went still. Eva snapped and demanded to know what Tim was doing. She screamed for him to shoot. Tim began to cry, whispering that he just wanted everything to go back to the way it used to be. Leslie told him she wanted that too, that she carried Eva's memory with her every day. She reminded him that Eva had been loving and kind, and that whatever stood before them now was no longer their daughter. Eva exploded, shouting at Tim not to listen. "I am your daughter. Dad, shoot her right now. Shoot her face, or I'll do it myself." But with that final outburst, Tim's expression changed. He turned the gun away from Leslie and pointed it at Eva. Eva froze, stunned. Tim whispered an apology and without hesitation pulled the trigger. Eva's body slumped and the wheelchair fell silent. Leslie moved toward Tim, but he quickly lifted the gun to his own head. She lunged forward to stop him, but before she could reach him, the shot echoed, and it was too late. And then the scene shifted back to Bruno as Margot walked away from him after hearing him say he didn't want her in his life. Bruno slowly raised his head, and the cinema projector flickered with a new image, The Last Supper. Seeing the message, Bruno decided he had no choice but to enter the next room. Meanwhile, after Rami finally vanished into the darkness below, a door behind Zoe creaked open. Zoe turned, saw the cart waiting again, and climbed in. The cart carried her forward until it reached its final destination. She stepped off carefully, taking slow, wary steps. And that was when Bruno and Zoe crossed paths. Zoe ran straight to him, holding his face in both hands, asking if they had kidnapped him too, and if he was okay. Bruno, still shaken, said that he saw Margot, that Margot seemed to be part of the park somehow. Zoe explained that she believed they had done the same thing to Rami, that they saw him too, and that they needed to help him. But looming before them was an old, decaying mansion. They both understood that they had no choice but to go inside if they wanted to escape GremoryLand. Bruno opened the main door. Inside was a long dining table set for guests, with mannequins seated stiffly around it. Zoe stepped in behind him, and as they walked deeper into the room, she noticed Leslie standing in a dim corner. Leslie asked why the two of them were here. Zoe explained that they were kidnapped and woke up inside GremoryLand. But then Gremory's voice echoed through the speakers. "Welcome back to Gremory Mansion. Please take your seats and join the other guests." All three sat. Zoe, shaking with anger, asked what the point of all this was. Why not just kill them and be done with it? Gremory ignored the question. "You have been invited to the Last Supper. A potential murderer hides among you. Your objective, identify and kill them before 12 o'clock. If you fail, all of you will die. On your plates, you will find the tools you need." They lifted the covers on their plates. Leslie received a metal adjustable wrench. Bruno received a heavy candle holder. Zoe received a gun. Then Gremory introduced the other guests seated at the table, one by one. Henry, the medium, in love with the ghost, suicidal, willing to kill to be with her. Annie, the mansion's cook, obsessed with perfecting her creations, never resting. Howdy, who called murder sport and hunted any living creature for fun. And Gladys, the eternal widow. After her fifth husband died, she became a suspect yet remained eager for a new partner. Gremory warned them all. "You are all suspects. Don't act like the murderer if you don't want to be killed. You have until 12. Then the final game began. Everyone scattered throughout the mansion. Leslie, Zoe, and Bruno stayed together searching room by room. They opened one door and found the widow sitting on her bed. But as Leslie stepped in, the widow's eyes glowed bright red. Zoe pulled Leslie back instantly, saying it must mean suspicion, that the dolls reacted to danger. They closed the door and continued exploring. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed in the kitchen.
Zoe pushed the kitchen door open, and there on the floor lay Annie, the cook, collapsed. Henry stood over her lifeless body. Zoe raised her gun immediately, accusing Henry of being the killer. Henry slowly turned, smiling eerily, and Zoe pulled the trigger. The shot tore through Henry's doll face, sending him crashing to the floor beside Annie. Gremory's voice cut through the tension. "Attention, everyone. The murderer has been located in the kitchen. There have already been 2 deaths. It seems Annie's heart issue could not be ignored. She suffered a fatal heart attack. This was a natural death. However, the other death was no accident. Henry has been killed by the murderer. There are only 10 minutes left. If you do not wish to die, you must eliminate the killer. Go to the kitchen and kill Zoe before time runs out."
At that moment, Howdy the hunter began moving toward the kitchen, heavy footsteps echoing across the mansion's halls. Leslie turned to Zoe, insisting they needed to hide her before he arrived. Zoe refused, reminding her that the rules were clear. If the killer wasn't eliminated by midnight, everyone would die. But Leslie didn't care about rules anymore. She wasn't going to let them hurt Zoe. Outside the kitchen door, Howdy finally arrived. Leslie reacted instantly, locking the door just as he attempted to force it open from the other side. She shouted that she wouldn't allow this place to hurt any of them again. But Howdy ignored her completely. From behind the door came the cold, mechanical sound of a shotgun being loaded. Leslie froze. She knew what that meant. She shouted for Zoe to hide, and Bruno urgently called for her to follow him deeper into the storage room. A second later, the door exploded inward as Howdy fired his shotgun. Zoe sprinted, diving into the next room, and Leslie raised her gun toward the hunter, demanding that he stay away from them. But with his glowing red eyes, Howdy advanced without fear. Leslie emptied her gun into him, shot after shot, until the hunter staggered and collapsed onto the ground. Before she could take his shotgun, a figure emerged behind her, a silhouette she hadn't even heard approach. A needle jabbed into her back, injecting something unknown and burning into her veins. Leslie gasped, dizzy and fading, as the widow stepped fully into the light. From inside the freezer room, Zoe called Leslie's name in panic. Zoe raised her gun toward the door, ready for the widow to enter, but instead, the widow calmly closed the door, sealing Bruno and Zoe inside the industrial freezer. Leslie watched in horror, barely able to stay conscious, as the widow leaned against the wall and pressed the switch that controlled the freezer's temperature. The machine roared to life, the temperature dropping rapidly. Bruno and Zoe were being locked inside, frozen alive. Leslie reached out, fighting to stay awake, but her strength faded. The widow turned toward her, smiling with a cold, satisfied look. Then the scene cut sharply to the past, revealing a clue. First, Henry the Medium. We cannot see the other side because it is impossible to exceed the speed of light, but they can watch you die in my hands. Then the attic. Eva listening to Gremory's voice whispering, you cannot see the lens through which you are being watched, but they can see you. They see you right now. Then Becca, the puppet, repeated her cryptic warning, we are just puppets for entertainment. Piece by piece, the truth revealed itself. Someone, something, from the outside was watching all of them, treating their lives like a show. And then the scene shifted to Bruno at the roller coaster the moment he pushed Margot. But instead of dying, Margot woke up after the fall. She was strangely alive and unharmed. Yet her clothes were no longer white. They were pitch black, like she had already crossed the other side, like she had already become part of GremoryLand. Margot slowly raised her head as she heard someone approaching. Behind her stood Tim, greeting her calmly. He told her to come with him, that he had something to show her. Margot followed him through the dim hallway until they reached a room lit only by the glow of a giant static-filled screen. Confused, she asked Tim what all of this was. Tim explained that she was standing in the mirror room, the only place in GremoryLand that connected directly to those observing them from the outside. Margot stared carefully at the screen, not understanding what he meant. But Tim continued saying that GremoryLand was a lie, and that now he would show her the real truth. Suddenly, the organ in the corner began playing, and the person seated at it was Eva. As the music echoed through the room, Margot turned back to the static screen and froze. What she saw wasn't a reflection or a glitch, but an image, a video of a real person watching them, someone from outside their world. Tim said that the person she saw was one of the beings on the other side, a place beyond the light of our universe. There were many more like her, looking at them through the lens at that very moment. These beings were like gods, able to contemplate their lives, able to travel through their time as if it were an open book. Tim told her not to worry about being speechless, that seeing something like this was like seeing a new color, something her mind needed time to process.
Right at that moment, Margot's phone buzzed inside her back. She grabbed it, glanced at the screen, and instantly felt her stomach drop. She turned back to Tim, demanding an explanation. Tim simply said, "Incredible, right? This is what they see. The lens is everywhere, always watching us, but you can't see it." That single revelation explained everything, that the watchers, the readers, the audience were the gods. They could look whenever they wanted, leave whenever they wanted, manipulate time simply by choosing when to read or watch. Margot stared again at her phone, and what she saw wasn't her camera, but the perspective of the gods looking directly back at her. The truth hit her so hard she collapsed, losing consciousness. The scene shifted to the present, Margot sitting alone on a bench after leaving Bruno. She looked directly at the invisible lens and asked quietly, "What are you looking at?" Then she pressed a hidden button inside the cinema and descended to the Gremory exit deep in the woods. She followed the stairway all the way down to the bottom floor, arriving at the chamber that held the upright casket wrapped in red veins. Slowly the casket opened, revealing Gremory. The scene shifted back to the past, to the moment Jax wrote in the group chat that Eva was the daughter of a cup, moments before they threw her out of the car in the middle of nowhere. Eva struggled to get up, trembling, when Gremory's voice whispered to her. He told her the moment he had spoken about all this time had finally come, that her body was dying because of those she considered friends, that she was far from home, with no signal, and she would inevitably die. But he told her not to be afraid. He said he was there to help her face her destiny without pain, that this time he would change the result. Eva looked behind her and saw Gremory's terrifying face. She ran as fast as she could until she reached a cliff and fell. As she lay there barely breathing, Gremory's voice returned, telling her that she had not felt pain because he had absorbed it, that soon her father would bring her back. Eva asked what really happened, and Gremory lied, saying her classmates had drugged her, that she had died, and Jax had shared her photos so everyone could laugh at her. He told her everything was planned, showed her a fake version of the story just to make her believe it. He said they were never her friends, only hypocrites who mocked her behind their back. But he promised her that the beauty born from suffering was the purest of all, and that she would bloom like no other. Then Tim opened the casket, and there inside was Eva, being resurrected. Back in the present, Margot stood face to face with Gremory inside the casket chamber. She rushed toward him and stopped, demanding answers, wanting to know what he really was and what he was trying to achieve with all of this. Gremory replied that he was merely a costume, drawn to the scent of suffering their broken hearts created. He said he offered new identities and a place where their wishes could be fulfilled, a system that only worked with everyone's help. Margot asked what he meant by everyone, and Gremory answered that they were all Gremory, each one wearing his costume for their own reasons. GremoryLand existed because of all of them, but also because of the ones watching from the outside, the ones who put on his mask with every new episode. Some wanted Jax to die, and GremoryLand fulfilled that desire. Others believed certain people deserved to live, and GremoryLand honored that too. Margot still didn't understand. If they were all Gremory, then who was the real Gremory? Gremory said the answer was written on her. The camera focused on the Japanese letters printed on her shirt. But he said it didn't matter who he really was. What mattered was what she could gain from all of this. Margot asked what he gained. Gremory smiled creepily and answered, catharsis. The scene cut to Zoe, still trying desperately to open the freezer door, calling out to Leslie. Bruno trembled in the corner, freezing to death. Through the phone, Margot could now see them. She watched them as they slowly got weaker. Gremory spoke again, saying that as long as they remained in this system, anything was possible. She could become an actress. She could get rid of Zoe and have Bruno all to herself. She could even bring her father back. He asked if she wanted to join him. Margot reached her bag and pulled out a gun, pointing it directly at Gremory. Gremory told her she couldn't kill him, that he was only a disguise, and that she needed GremoryLand after what happened on the roller coaster with Bruno. But Margot said she would rather spend her life in prison for what she did to Mia than rot in GremoryLand as his puppet. Gremory insisted he wasn't talking about her confession about Mia, but what happened after. He revealed that when Bruno pushed her off the roller coaster, she had actually died. And like Eva, her body became fertilizer for the park. Because of that, she could continue to exist, but only inside GremoryLand. If she destroyed the system, she would disappear forever. Margot said she had always chased her own happiness, doing terrible things to get it, and she believed she would never truly deserve happiness. But none of that mattered anymore. She only wanted Bruno to stop suffering because of her. She looked at Bruno once more on her phone, then pointed her gun back at Gremory. Gremory asked what she didn't understand. that no matter what she did, she couldn't kill him, that a system depended on all of them, that as long as they existed, so would he. But Margot said he was the one who didn't understand. He had said that they were all Gremory, and if that was true, then the system only existed because the outside world continued to watch. Margot turned toward the lens, toward the unseen audience, and shouted, "If nobody sees you, you don't exist." She fired. The lens broke. In the broken shards, we see Rami being sentenced to prison, finally speaking to his psychiatrist. We see the others gathering again, this time with Bruno holding a baby, possibly his own. And then the narrator concludes, "The lens is broken, so I can't continue with this." And with that, GremoryLand ends.